The Nintendo Wii Balance Board. Back when the Wii was in its heyday and grandparents just couldn't get enough of that there Wii Sports and Chicken Shoot, the Big N saw an opportunity to tackle the new and huge casual gamer market, and get them up and moving and losing a few pounds by selling them a super basic piece of workout software with Wii Fit, and basically a bathroom scale to use with it. Working out was the clear main selling point here, and many more games would release that had their own spin on things. Hell, this trend was so popular other consoles got in on it too. And that's all fine and dandy conceptually, but how did it actually work? Well, it's quite simple. It's called a balance board after all. Built in are two sensors, one for each foot, and they can detect just how much pressure you're pushing into each one, as well as where you're shifting your center of balance. That's it. Funnily enough, not even the first time Nintendo would try something like this. While plenty of exercise titles over the years would use the board, there are actually a shocking amount of more traditional Wii games that supported it as well. WiiWare had some of these too, that's kinda cool, and the Wii U, well, it had a good run. So I've taken it upon myself to scrounge up 10 actual games that support the balance board, and today I'm gonna dust off that fabled Wii peripheral and give them a whirl. I know a lot of people are gonna be asking about Wii Music, which does have a mode that can use the balance board, but I'm gonna hold off on that one until the time is right, which is hopefully never. I simply have no time or desire to put Wii Music back in my console. I think I'm good for now. I have much more compelling games I want to take a look at. Like the Garfield show, Threat of the Space Lasagna. What do you mean you don't think this game is gonna be good? I mean, I think most of us are familiar with Garfield, right? Orange cat, doesn't like Mondays, likes lasagna for some reason. Well, now the lasagna is out for revenge, and this time, it's from space. Somehow, I'm not caught up with the show. They cause a whole bunch of mischief and naturally leave it up to our good old favorite lazy orange feline to save the day. And it's a minigame collection, because of course it is. So this is a pretty common trend when it comes to these games that have some balance board support. We have a bunch of minigames that were already built with the Wii Remote in mind. It's all a matter of sifting through enough menus before realizing, oh, now this one I can finally use the balance board on. There is a proper story mode with linear progression, but we're immediately greeted by a game that can only use the Wii Remote. Luckily, all of the games are already accessible back in the main menu. Alright, here's one. You play as Garfield riding atop Odie, while the other players pester you with balls. You see that meter? Well, that is you shifting your balance to stay on top. It's as simple as that. And then there's this one, where you're rolling a ball to attack the mice, Mario Party style. It's pretty simple. You tilt in any sort of direction, the ball will go that way. It works. Oh, and this one sucks. All you have to do is lean left and right to grab the food and avoid all of the other junk. But here we have a major problem with some of these balance board games. They expect you to make really quick movements back and forth, but sometimes it flat out doesn't function. It's the more subtle movements that are what the balance board does best in my opinion. Like there's a game here that has you remove lasagna pests by replicating Garfield's movements. And yeah, it actually feels like you have to do them in order to succeed. This is just a minigame collection and only a handful of the games use the board. Wouldn't recommend. How about this? Super Monkey Ball. This seems like it would actually work perfect here. Step and Roll takes the typical Monkey Ball formula and simplifies the level design to be easily playable by shifting the world literally under your feet. And it actually totally works and feels really good. There are no weird gimmicks either, which is great. Simply get to the goal. No weird jumping, no boss battles, just honest to goodness ball rolling. We also have a graph shown at all times showing where our balance is being shifted to. And that is actually super appreciated. It helps out quite a bit when I need to figure out how to move. I just wish they got rid of the timer as well. It is a lot tougher getting by the most basic of obstacles here, and running out of time is a more common issue than I've ever experienced in this franchise because of it. But with enough perseverance, you will be plowing through worlds in no time. And you gotta deal with unskippable credits as well. It's kind of interesting too, because you can play this entire game with just the Wii Remote, similar to Banana Blitz. But in order to compensate for the easier form of control, the game places a ton of obstacles in your path. That doesn't make the game harder, just more annoying. And besides, if you do play the game this way, you are in for the easiest monkey ball game you'll ever experience. A good chunk of the minigames here also use the balance board, and for the most part, they aren't all that bad. Some of them are way worse than others, but I admittedly did have some fun here. Monkey Target was pretty lame though. Come on guys, it used to be the best one. How do they keep messing this up? The snowboarding game in particular is especially cool because you play by rotating the board 90 degrees. Really neat idea. If you're on the lookout for a Super Monkey Ball game that's going to contort your body to do movements as precise as the GameCube games had you do, sadly that's not here. Also, you may be a bit of a masochist. Marble Saga Kororinpa, sequel to the hot Wii launch game, Kororinpa Marble Mania. All these years later, and I still have no idea what Kororinpa means. So I'm actually a huge fan of all of these marble rolling games, and these are some of my favorites. They're all about tilting the stage by tilting the Wii remote, and I believe they do a much better job of that than either of the Monkey Ball games did. You can even sequence break this one if you try hard enough. The sequel here, Marble Saga, even has an adventure mode starring this adorable little ant named, wait for it, Anthony. Haha, it's me! The balance board support here is way better than in Step and Roll. While the game does have a bunch of levels in the adventure mode, there is a completely different set of levels to use with the balance board, which means we have stages perfectly designed around both types of controller inputs with none of the nonsense Step and Roll gave us. I love this, honestly. It is the best use of the balance board yet. It is definitely harder controlling the game this way, but the stakes are also a lot lower, which is the best way to handle something like this. Which can't be said for, yeah, Punch-Out Wii has balance board support as well. There's not really much to say here, to be honest, aside from, it's pretty terrible. Yeah, it works, you dodge in the 3 different directions that you can normally do with a controller. I guess if you go all out and combine this with the Wii Remote and Nunchuck to throw your punches, even get some boxing glove accessories, then maybe it can be kind of immersive? Yeah, no, just stick to a controller. I like Wii boxing better. But hey, I've been teasing this one long enough. Yes, in fact, Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Winter Games has support as well. I've said many times before that this is my favorite in the series, so I am actually really looking forward to this. So as it turns out, only half of the events are playable in this mode. We got some skiing, snowboarding by, once again, rotating the board 90 degrees, and skeleton, which is actually played by sitting on the balance board. That's really cool. Monkey Ball had a similar minigame, and that was enjoyable too. Since all of the events here are relatively simplistic, when it comes down to basically tilting left and right and maybe a button press here or there, it actually works really well. But once you have a wider range of movement options available to you, it ends up not feeling precise at all. It feels like you're being restricted to 8 degrees of movement, so it is unnecessarily difficult to get where you need to go. These are nothing special, but they're attached to an already good game, so it's fine. Another good use of the board. And if you wanted more of those events, just on a larger scale, well, here we have Wii Ski and Snowboard. Pretty big lost opportunity not using WII there. That seemed pretty obvious, but hey, that's just me. Wii Ski and Snowboard took me by surprise. It is incredibly charming. You get thrown into a massive snowy mountain, and go. There are missions to tackle, a handful of customization options, and secrets spread throughout the entire mountain to encourage exploration. But really, this game is all about taking in the world at your own pace, and I am really digging it. Navigation is done primarily with either the skis or the snowboard, and as such, using the balance board involves a whole lot of tilting, as well as a whole lot of motion controls to accelerate. And while that can be enjoyable in short increments, I would not recommend playing the entire game this way. It gets old incredibly quickly in my opinion, and it makes some of the precision-based missions way too difficult. Motion controls with the Wii Remote and Nunchuck are still required even when you're not using the board, but it is a lot more manageable that way, so like Mario and Sonic, the below average balance board controls are tacked on to an already pretty good game, so whatever. But we even got a full-blown sequel with Go Vacation. Now, I've wanted to talk about this game for a while. Essentially, this is kinda more of the same, but while Wii Ski and Snowboard specialized in atmosphere and exploration, Go Vacation is all about variety. On top of having a brand new snowy mountain to explore, we also have a beach resort, a mountainside, and a bustling city, each of them housing a bunch of unique minigames based on their respective locations, totaling a whopping 50 plus different events to take part in. And that is super awesome on paper, but Man, Namco Bandai really tried to get motion controls in here as many ways as possible. Like, there are more vehicle options for exploration now, which is cool, but for most of them, you operate by using some sort of motion controls with the Wii Remote and Nunchuck, like tilting them at the same time to turn, on top of tilting with the balance board. It's just a bit much, honestly. Luckily though, for this little experiment, all of the minigames that can use the balance board are accessible right from the main menu, and at this point, it's kinda what you would expect. Basic tilting where applicable, left, right, forward, and backward, and not much more. The only one that was really clever was the dog sledding game. To mimic pushing off of a sled, you physically push only one foot off the board. It feels really good. But like, they also put in a dancing game, and that doesn't use the board. I mean, it's not that I really wanted a dancing game where I physically have to dance, it's just that I expected it, so I'm like disappointed and happy at the same time. Go Vacation is definitely the better game here, but the simplicity of Wii Ski and Snowboard still makes it a better fit for a balance board experience. Also, Go Vacation, like out of nowhere, got ported to the Switch for some reason, and you can play that with zero motion controls, so you're better off going that route instead anyway. We're really scraping the bottom of the barrel, aren't we? This is dreadful. At least we got penguins. Rayman, Raving, Rabbids, TV Party. Ubisoft couldn't help themselves. So this is really just Raving Rabbids 3, with Rayman once again having barely anything to do with the game aside from showing up in a few cutscenes and being forced into the title. It's a minigame collection where only a small handful of the games have the option to use the balance board. I know, I'm surprised as well. As expected, some of them do the tried and true tilting left and right, which does work as expected, but often the game also asks you to do some more specific movements, and I don't know, maybe it's just me here, but they rarely ever work as I wanted them to. There's a dancing game here that actually does use the board, but now I know why Go Vacation didn't use it. Every time the game told me to push into the board, it never recognized it. Oh, wait a second, is this a Rabbid cover of Toxic by Britney Spears? Oh, I take it all back. This game's great. The more balance board I play, the more I realize why it didn't really take off. When you have the more subtle movements, like moving left and right, it works fine. But then you're really only limited to the fitness games because those are the titles that did that really well. When you're told to do anything else, anything grander, it feels like you're simply wasting your time. Thankfully though, there are still a few games that I would really recommend outside of that. If you have a balance board, or if you don't, they're only like $5 or $10 at this point, then you'll have an extra little balance mode on top of everything. Super Paper Mario is in such an odd place in the overall series. Yes, it is that game that still rings true, poking fun at people complaining about games they've never played on the internet, but it is a whole lot deeper than that, trust me. Almost as if you can easily graph out the rise and fall of a franchise, 64 and Thousand Year Door were incredible, and just when we thought we were getting more of that, Sticker Star and Color Splash played with everybody's emotions, and I don't think OG Paper Mario fans have been the same ever since. And that's coming from someone who did enjoy Color Splash. Super released at this very weird time, this sort of midway point during a major shift in the series. It's not a forgotten game by any means, but depending on who you talk to, whether or not this is one of the good ones is kinda hard to come to a conclusion to. But now I think it's my turn to throw my hat into the ring. I've been a fan of this series ever since it first debuted. I've owned this game since 2007, and on the cusp of another Paper Mario game that is sure to cause even more rifts in the community. I'm excited about that one. I think it's as good a time as any to check this game out and see how it holds up. You remember those cute little Bowser side-scrolling levels from TTYD, right? What if that was a full game? Bam, Super Paper Mario. Coming off of the success of that absolute classic, development quickly began for a sequel. On the GameCube. This answers one of the biggest questions about the game right off the bat. Why isn't Super more of a traditional RPG? Well, it was originally going to be on the same console as an already existing one, so I can totally see why Nintendo wanted to put out something different. But I'm assuming the combination of development leaking too far into 2006 and coming up with ideas to use the brand new Wii controller, the game was eventually moved over to that new console instead. Twilight Princess, famously released on both, and Donkey Kong Barrel Blast, a racing game meant to use the bongo controller on the GameCube, also made the jump with a much less good control scheme, let's just say. I loved this game when it was new, and in 2007, I feel like the reception was a lot more generally positive, but as time has gone on, and the wounds of a Paper Mario fan have grown a lot more devastating, I think people are now a lot more split on this one. It does some of the things that made the original game special, but the gameplay was totally changed to be more experimental. Let's take a brand new core concept and just keep messing with it as the game goes on. No matter how outlandish the idea may be, we can figure out how to make it work. There's a dating sim in this one, for crying out loud. And this idea of experimentation within the Paper Mario franchise still carries through to this day, despite the fact that nobody asked for it. When looking at Super specifically, the aspect that easily gets the most praise is the story. And yeah, you know what? It is pretty fantastic, but in a way that is not so cut and dry. The game starts off with Peach getting kidnapped, and then you gotta go to the 8 worlds and defeat the bad guys to get the shiny things. That is so super basic and to the point, and for a while, it doesn't really get all that much deeper than that. Count Bleck makes for a pretty interesting antagonist, and his crew does have some bright moments, sporadic as they may be, especially when Mimi transforms into this terrifying spider thing. 10 plus years later? Yeah, bro, that's just creepy. Oh, and Dementio. Man. By the end of the adventure, this dude makes one a hell of a bad guy. Easily one of the most intimidating in the entire franchise. But for the first half of the game or so, things remain relatively bright and bubbly. A jolly romp through colorful worlds and wacky bad guys with a pretty great soundtrack in tow. Francis is still just as bizarre as always. Super weird otaku fills his mansion with cat-made robots and other Paper Mario references, and then there's that dating sim segment right before the actual boss fight, which is still hilarious. One of the conversation choices for Peach is asking a giant lizard how much he makes. That's genuinely amazing. This masked being, Mr. L, is pretty great as well. He looks so familiar too. I'm not really sure what it is, but there's just something about his appearance that reminds me of somebody else. Soon after meeting him, you fight a giant robot head in space, so I can't really be bothered trying to remember what I don't remember. This is just really cool. However, after that, things take a turn for the dire, I guess is a way to put it. In between each chapter, short text blurbs pop up telling the story of a pair of loved ones not able to live the lives they desire. And for the longest time, there's no context given to it, it's just up to you to figure out what's going on. We also get to see the inside of these meetings in Count Bleck's lair, and slowly get to see what his true motives have been this entire time. Before the game even begins, he forces a fake wedding between Peach and Bowser to call upon the Chaos Heart, and unleash its power to destroy the world. And during your adventure, you will see a black hole in the sky continue to grow in size. Now, in a typical game of this style, you think you'd be fixing things before the black hole reaches max capacity, but in all actuality, by the time you reach chapter 6 and you're in the middle of this tournament, you're actually too late, and the end of the world is about to occur. Once that news breaks, all of the participants in the tournament are terrified, and rightfully so. You watch their world get totally eaten up by a black hole. Oh man, it even killed my controller batteries. This got way too real too fast, hold on. All that remains is a lifeless white void, and just when you think you've made some real good progress, taking down Mr. L once again, he actually more or less gets totally killed, and then everybody else gets killed too, and now your main objective is to fight your way out of literal hell. I don't think anybody played Thousand Year Door and said, needs more hell. It's kind of cute. I mean, all of the spirit characters refer to this land as the Minus World, a clever little reference to the original Super Mario Bros. But when you look past that, these dudes are dead. And from there, the stakes keep growing to an incredible degree. And honestly, it can get kinda depressing too. Count Bleck's backstory and how he ties together with your primary partner, Tippy, is actually really well written. And it's cool how we have this bad guy wants to end the world plotline with so much depth that's told to you as a reward for making your way through the adventure. This part here is pretty notable. You must prevail. Let no one else in the universe feel this sadness. And then Luigi hits him with the okie dokie. God, Luigi, show some emotion, you're heartless. You can definitely make the argument that the story only gets good about 2/3 of the way through, but the end contrasts the cheerful beginning so much, it makes the holy cow, they got away with rated E for this moments have a much stronger impact. That being said, the bulk of the original characters do leave a lot to be desired. I always thought they were pretty uninteresting, and I was never really a fan of their blocky designs, but at least the locations are somewhat populated, so that's nice, and they don't really overstay their welcome, so it's not that big of a deal. They just don't compare at all to the townspeople of the previous games. We still get plenty of that good old Paper Mario wacky, goofy goodness, and plenty of emotional moments as well. It is a very fulfilling plot all the way through. There's this one part where Mario silently hesitates, leaving Luigi alone to fight for himself. This is more character development for Mario than you can find in any other Mario game in the entire franchise. After you beat the story, you're able to re-enter that previously destroyed tournament as a post-game extra, and since that is a result of you saving the world, it is a whole lot more satisfying than it would be otherwise. It's still incredibly repetitive, but hey, it's kinda cool. So yes, the story is just as awesome as everyone says it is. As for the gameplay, yeah, it's alright, I guess. I understand what they were going for here. You take the RPG elements of series past and tie it into the more traditional side-scrolling Mario gameplay. For the most part, it's fine, but there are so many things that were attempted here that, in my opinion, really don't land. Don't get me wrong, there is definite fun to be had here, but it often feels like they just couldn't settle on how much of an RPG they wanted this game to be. Your final party consists of Mario, Peach, Bowser, and Luigi, who surprisingly looks like Mr. L for some reason. I don't know, I don't understand that one. They each have their own abilities, but Mario is the only one able to perform the game's main gimmick, swapping the perspective from 2D to 3D. Since many of the game's puzzles and paths to progression lie within the 3D space, there's not much reason to play as anyone else. You change to Peach to cross over that long gap, and then immediately change back to Mario. The same goes for Luigi with higher platforms because he can jump higher. At least Bowser's a tank, able to deal extra damage to make bosses a breeze, but still, there's no reason to play as him otherwise. This also kinda nullifies a lot of the items too. There are plenty of options that you can find and purchase that give you RPG-like extra attacks. Utilizing them to deal the most damage usually takes far too long, and it's far too gimmicky to get right when you can just nail a few hits on the head instead in just as much time. And your partners this time around, the pixels, aren't all that useful either. Once you get carry, you're gonna stick to that one. It makes you faster and makes your hitbox for landing on enemies a little bit bigger. Cool. The others are just there to solve contextual puzzles. There are so many tools at your disposal in a game that doesn't really need them. And since all you need for battles is Bowser, carry, and maybe some healing items for if you take too much damage, the game is subsequently also very easy. The stage themes can be very interesting, but the things that you do in them rarely are. One stage in Chapter 2 tells you to grind out money to pay for a broken vase, a segment that is only saved because you can find the password to a ton of rubies online, rather than wasting your time getting some money and purchasing the password in-game. You explore space in Chapter 4, that's kinda neat, but it's also pretty easy to get lost because there aren't that many set pieces to keep track of. Multiple chapters also feature fetch quests. Just run around the area to find a couple of things and then go back to the origin point to unlock progression. Sometimes things are just hidden in plain sight, so you gotta point the Wii remote at the screen because your partner Tippy has the ability to see things that are invisible. Cute idea in 2007, not so much anymore. Ha, do you get this one? It's pretty funny. You see, you make it to this block puzzle with no idea what to do, so you have to travel all the way back to this guy and literally write out the word please 5 times, so he gives you a combination that is so long it is impossible to memorize, so you gotta write it down instead and then utilize it when you get back. That's funny. To move forward in this level, you gotta stand on the pillar and then press minus and 1 at the same time. What? It kind of feels like the game just really hopes you enjoy the novelty of the 2D to 3D mechanic because, aside from that, things can often feel boring and monotonous. Once again, it's not that there aren't moments of fun throughout the adventure, but in the grand scheme of things, those segments are relatively bare bones. Arguably, Super's high moments are a lot higher than Thousand Year Doors, but the low moments are also a lot lower. And that, in my opinion, is the crux of the argument here. The story in Super Paper Mario is fantastic. It's really, really good. And since it just keeps ramping up all the way until the end credits, it makes you feel really good when you finish the game up. almost so that it kind of makes you forget all the mediocrity you had to go through to get there. When you simply take the game for what it is and not really think about some of the poor design choices, it is worth noting that the game is still pretty fun to control. The combat can be a bit iffy from time to time, but moving forward and seeing what the next level is going to throw your way is still enjoyable. There's 2 different pits of 100 trials, and also the aforementioned Samur Kingdom tournament, providing challenges pitting you against 100 rooms of enemies. The rewards for doing so aren't all that great, mostly just cards with current and previous Paper Mario partners on them, but it's at least something to do, and they are easily the most difficult challenges in the game. There's also this pretty nifty arcade with 4 minigames that all use the Wii Remote. Always been a fan of stuff like this. You got a bunch of recipes that you can cook up, there are maps leading you to hidden items. None of this side content gives you anything really worthwhile, but if you like this game, there is side content aplenty to dive into. Is Super Paper Mario good? Yes. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I would say yes. Almost in the same way I think Color Splash is good. Let me finish. I believe that both of these games are far more similar than people are willing to admit. They both feature plenty of elements that made those original 2 Paper Mario games so special, but they're implemented around a bunch of other mechanics and design choices that seem experimental just for the sake of experimenting. As a result, unlike the universal praise those original games get, these 2 are incredibly divisive, and in my opinion, if a game from a popular series is considered divisive, then yeah, if you haven't yet, you should totally check the game out. Everybody's opinion is different here. You may come out with this with a brand new favorite, or you may hate it. You'll never know unless you try. And remember, you don't want to be that guy that goes online to complain about games that you've never played. But yeah, Sticker Star is still bad. From the mid to late 2000s, the world was so overloaded with Sonic the friggin' Hedgehog. Sure, it's easy to simply look at Sonic 06, laugh, and then call it a day. But man, there was honestly so much more than that. This era was definitely throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. The problem, though, was barely anything did. Sonic Rush was pretty cool. You know, writers had a really neat art style. The GBA port of Sonic 1, you know, that's one of the funniest things to ever grace the gaming landscape, so that's pretty cool. You have Gems Collection. That game finally brought Sonic the Fighters to home consoles. Oh boy. While a mainline title was getting really close to dropping, featuring a gameplay style that would resonate with so many fans around the world, one of the more prominent experimental attempts, despite Sega now pretending as if it never happened, is the Sonic Storybook series. The Storybook series, a pair of games that didn't get that Storybook series title until Game 2, and then we never got Game 3 because both of these games sold poorly. A for effort, I guess. You know, the little page flap graphic they cooked up on Black Knight's cover is pretty cool. The premise behind these games is super easy to understand. Let's throw Sonic into the world of a storybook and see what happens. I mean, hey, it worked so well when Mario traveled through time, what could possibly go wrong here? It all began with a teaser trailer that had Sonic playing around with the fancy new Wii Remote. I remember thinking this was pretty cool, honestly. This new controller technology and all the hype around it, it was still so mysterious, and to see a familiar character using one was pretty cool. Aw, check it out, Sonic's holding a controller. He's officially a gamer. The gamer hat in Sonic Forces suddenly makes a lot more sense. Initially titled Sonic Wildfire, the game was revealed at E3 2006, promising a very different experience than anything we've gotten prior, and less than 1 year later, with a brand new title, Sonic and the Secret Rings was unleashed in early 2007, only a few months into the Sonic 06 grieving process. And then, having a much less interesting pre-release history, Sonic and the Black Knight released 2 years later, and then the world immediately tried to move on. As much as a third game in the series based on something like Greek mythology would be really cool, clearly the world was not ready. They only started calling this the Storybook series with this game too, so the whole thing is just pretty confusing. Whether or not this was an attempt to legitimately be creative, or just an excuse to reuse the back of a box art for 2 games, we may never know. But today, let's take a look back and see what lucky Wii owners were treated to, and just what caused this sub-series to die out before becoming a full-on trilogy. Spoilers, it's because the games aren't very good. Oh man, immediately you can tell Secret Rings is serious business. Look at the lag on the menu. Oh, that's a good sign. That's some blast processing right there. Okay, before we get too cynical here, I do want to say that I actually really like the idea of Sonic running through these different storybook-inspired worlds. One of the strongest aspects of this franchise is the wide variety of locations that you run through to get to your destination. And if this is an excuse to validate elements like dinosaurs and crowded medieval villages, I'm totally on board. What if Mario's time machine wasn't a complete disaster, essentially? Regardless of the actual quality of the games themselves, within this era of Sonic, we got to see a lot of effort made to make these adventures really unique, so I can at least respect that. It's just that, in execution, not so much. Both of the plots are pretty similar. The stories of Arabian Nights and King Arthur aren't going according to plan. So we got a girl who calls upon the help of a blue hedgehog to stop the super threatening bad guy and save the day. And yeah, that's about it. That's more or less the story of both of these games.
Place the ring on your finger.
Like this?
Rub the ring.
Like this?
What's wrong with you? You put a ring on your finger and rub it. What's so complicated about that? Along the way, you'll run into a bunch of other Sonic characters that are all playing the role of a character in the story rather than being themselves. Sonic is the only one here who's actually playing himself. It's like this really massive stage play, and Sonic is the only one not knowing what's going on. It's like one big prank. They all certainly help build upon the world that's being presented in front of you, but they don't really have that much of an impact in these stories since they're treated as the characters they're portraying, not the characters who's playing them. It's not really a big deal though, it's all pretty lighthearted at the end of the day. Except for that one part in Black Knight where Knuckles is about to off himself because you defeated him in battle. Still can't believe I said that out loud. That's a thing. That's a thing in this game. Between that and Sonic wishing for an endless supply of handkerchiefs at the end of Secret Rings, we have a whole lot of storytelling gems here, let me tell you. When directly comparing the two, I'll give the nod to Black Knight. Secret Rings is fine, and the storybook theme for the cutscenes is pretty neat, but it's largely forgettable. At least with Black Knight, the presentation is so much better, leaving a much stronger impression. The storybook cutscenes look a whole lot cleaner, but man, the fully 3D ones, they look great. A whole lot of personality shines through in these, and they're pretty enjoyable to watch. During this few-year span, you can say whatever you want about Sonic games, but their 3D animation here was top-notch. People reminisce about the opening cutscene to Unleashed for a reason, and the 3D scenes in Black Knight are no different. This was also like the first time a Sonic game acknowledged chili dogs. I like that a lot, actually. It's about time. Also, there's a talking sword in that one. Sure? Also in this era, Sonic was making new friends every 20 seconds. That's just a thing he did. So I guess I should inherently be a little bit more annoyed about this, but Caliburn, as he's called, is pretty low-key compared to his contemporaries. So as unnecessary as a talking sword is, considering you spend the entire game swinging him around, surely he's about to get incredibly dizzy. It's fine. It's not a big deal. It's fine. But with all that out of the way, how about the gameplay? Okay, so essentially Sonic and the Secret Rings is an auto-runner. Credit where credit's due, this was long before auto-runners were even considered much of a thing, so if any franchise was going to try to implement this gameplay style, Sonic's perfect. I guess. He goes forward on his own, and you move left and right by tilting the Wii remote accordingly and pushing it forward in mid-air to do homing attacks. It's a fine enough idea. You gotta remember, interest was so high in that controller at the time. I can't blame Sega for trying to experiment with it. But he just ends up feeling so sluggish to control. Sometimes the controls just don't cooperate, which is often a problem with the Wii in and of itself, but some of the more minor things, like the speed of turning and the time it takes to come to a complete stop, those are things that you do eventually gain upgrades for, but when you start on a new file, it's trash. And typically, I love upgrade systems. Unleashed had an upgrade system and it was pretty decent there, but here, what? This is really bad. I don't know, isn't the whole idea to take a good character and make him play even better, rather than have a bad character play decent? Going back to the first stage, fully leveled up, is pretty humorous, honestly, but this is still not how an upgrade system should be implemented. Black Knight would forego this idea, and it was for the best. There is a boosting system here, that's kinda neat. Unleashed would go ahead and make it a primary mechanic for the games going forward, but here is kinda where it made its start outside of Sonic Rush, so That's kinda neat. It doesn't really help that for the majority of the game, the levels kind of feel very similar to each other. Outside of the themes of these stages, the things that you do within them to get to the end is pretty much identical every single time. And when the game decides to change things up, it's never really for the better. So, to quote, fix that, there is a ridiculous amount of side missions to complete as well. But unlike previous Sonic games where those extra challenges piggyback off of the existing levels in somewhat interesting ways, these feel just so artificial. Break jars, don't break jars, collect rings, don't collect rings, try and hit this floating guy with a homing attack without breaking your controller in half. This is a lot harder than it sounds. There's also no real indicator on what you need to complete to progress in the story. You kind of just unlock new levels seemingly at random, leading to incredibly poor pacing in an adventure that still only takes a few hours to complete. Sometimes you'll just do a bunch of challenges hoping that one of them is going to be the key to progression, but another time you'll finish a level and then immediately go into a boss fight. It's really inconsistent. The main joy of beating these missions is that typically you just unlock a million extras instead. Yeah, man, you know, showing all of these unlocks individually with that sound effect playing every time, that was a really good idea. And all of these years later, I still have absolutely no idea what the hell a genie egg is. When it comes to the main levels, I honestly don't even think they're all that bad. But you do so much that's not that it makes for an overall obnoxious experience. When we move on over to Black Knight, things don't really get all that much better. If anything, that damn sword makes this entire experience a whole lot worse. Despite the game looking very identical to Secret Rings, it's no longer an autorunner. You just hold forward on the analog stick instead, and you kinda get the same results. Okay, so I know this isn't really that controversial of a take or anything like that, but the sword kinda ruins the whole thing. The stages are just as linear as Secret Rings, and to be fair, the things that you do within them are a lot more diverse, so hey, fair play to them, it is a bit of an improvement. There is just nothing done with the sword that works. What we end up getting is just a barrage of bland level design, littered with enemies that are just there to slash at a fast pace. So hey, at least now you have something to keep you occupied, while the landscapes and swooping camera angles are the main thing that try to make the individual stages stand out. And man, even though we do have analog control now, doesn't make Sonic any less obnoxious. Honestly, the Wii is one of my favorite consoles ever. I don't hate motion controls, but a lot of the times here, you just hold forward, shake the Wii remote, and hope for the best. Even if the sword swinging was attached to a button, it would then just result in a button mashing adventure instead. Hell, you can crap on Shadow the Hedgehog all you want, but at least the gun gameplay sometimes kinda meshed well with the game's speed. There are waggle-fest disasters of boss fights. There's this one stage where you guide Light with the motion controls, which feels incredibly off. You get to interact with these random village people, but that requires you to stand still and do a bunch of button presses so you can donate some of your rings and get some random items in return. It's not fun. Roughly halfway through the adventure as well, Black Knight also includes extra characters to play as. They control slightly differently than Sonic, but it doesn't really change things up all that much, since the core gameplay is as limited as it is. But it's at least a neat novelty nonetheless. They made a big deal out of taking these Sonic characters and putting them in the world of King Arthur. You may as well do something with it. On the surface, these may just seem like bad games. We agree and then move on with our day. But in actuality, there's a lot going on here, and some of it is really admirable, but none of it is fun. And I think that's the best way to describe both games in the Sonic Storybook series. Aesthetically, things are fine despite being on the Wii, a less powerful console. I think the soundtracks in both games are really good, especially the butt rock in Secret Rings. Oh boy, it is the exact level of bad music that I love. Make-beliefs reborn, myths in mind rethought, question all that's known, legends blurred and torn. I'm not really quite sure what that means, but it sounds really powerful. The stories and the personalities of the characters within them are decent enough. Black Knight even has a genuine plot twist, which is pretty cool. Didn't see it coming back in the day. And I can always appreciate when it's obvious that a team was trying so hard to polish these turds with these occasional gimmicks, but if the game itself is a turd, then none of that other stuff really matters at the end of the day. I kinda just think this was simply Sonic's identity at this point in time. You know, there was a whole lot of good that was being done, specifically in aspects like the cutscenes and the music, but when it comes to the thing that is the most important, the gameplay, Sorry, man, these games are hot garbage. Oh man, and we didn't even talk about the multiplayer modes. Both games feature them. You got a bunch of mini-games and secret rings, and a battle mode in Black Knight. Neither of them are good. You know, I kinda figured we were leaving the Sonic minigame collections on the Dreamcast with Sonic Shuffle, but hey, here we are. There's really not much to say here, honestly. Playing as actual Sonic characters is kinda nice, I guess, but I think at the very least, things would have been a little bit better if they totally stuck with the role-playing idea and you just went full force with that. Playing as the actual characters who were behind the Storybook characters, that kind of just makes these feel like total throwaways, an excuse to put 2 to 4 players on the back of the box, and that's it. I know there are some people out there that are really nostalgic for Secret Rings and Black Knight. I get it. Before Sonic Colors, if you only had a Wii prior to 2010, all you had to play were a bunch of Genesis games on the Virtual Console, an extremely cut down port of Unleashed, and these two. And clearly, Sega thought they had something here by dubbing these games the Storybook series by the time Black Knight came around, and then immediately retired it. It's kinda similar to Sonic 4. We got Episode 1, Episode 2, and just when you thought we were gonna get Episode 3, no. They had their ideas set far too high without having the chops to properly deliver on their promises. We got a bunch of interesting ideas, but that can only get you so far. They're not good. An interesting part of the Wii's library and the overall Sonic franchise, and we can probably argue which one of these is slightly better than the other, but they're not much more than that. On March 26, 2018, users will no longer be able to add funds to the Wii Shop channel, basically signaling the death of the service. Arguably one of the most important aspects of the Wii's success, which, as we all remember, was a bit of a phenomenon. Nowadays, I think it's easy to forget how big of a deal the Wii Shop channel became, especially with modern online shops offering full retail titles. Meanwhile, the Virtual Console was the Wii's big online draw. They managed to sell NES Donkey Kong for $5 and get away with it. I bought it too. What can I tell you? A Nintendo fanboy knows no bounds. Sure, emulation on computers was definitely a thing, but getting these games officially re-released on a console for either nostalgia's sake or finding a gem that you missed out on was incredibly enticing. Even the act of purchasing the games gave you a bit of a blast to the past. From Nintendo's own classics, major third-party games on Nintendo's consoles, games from Nintendo's old competition, and even some Neo Geo and arcade titles. Super Street Fighter 2 for Genesis even had online support. And yeah, not every single heavy hitter was here. Remember, this was an era where Nintendo would barely acknowledge the fact that the word mother existed. Meanwhile, nowadays, Earthbound can get ported to the new 3DS, and it's not even the biggest news of that direct. Each console also had its own uniform prices, meaning mostly every NES game was $5, every Super Nintendo game was $8, etc, etc. Which made, realistically, no sense. But man, how many people finally got introduced to the TurboGrafx 16 here? At the time the Wii came out, I had no idea this machine even existed, but it turns out there was another great classic console that existed back in the day. And it's thanks to the Wii Shop channel that I, and presumably many others, realized that as well. The Wii's Virtual Console also helped spark a huge interest in new titles that played like retro titles, Mega Man 9 being a perfect example, and now we move on to WiiWare. WiiWare was Nintendo's solution for original downloadable titles, and it brought us a lot of interesting games. Like I just mentioned, Mega Man 9 and then later Mega Man 10 were huge, and sure, they were released on other consoles as well, but given how the games were designed, it almost fit more to be on the same console that you can purchase 1 through 6 on. And other companies took the same approach with their games, most notably Konami with their Rebirth games. Gradius, Contra, and Castlevania all made retro returns under this title. And while they weren't necessarily groundbreaking, they're all pretty fun, and they have a very retro aesthetic, which is simply neat. Sunsoft made a new, albeit very, very ugly Blaster Master game. Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 1 made its way to the service. That's about as much as I'll say on the subject. Bubble Bobble made a grand return to console. Naturally, Bomberman showed up as well, and even Nintendo themselves made a brand new Dr. Mario game with online play. But more surprising from the big N, a brand new Excitebike game with World Rally. The Wii actually had 2 completely new games in the Excite series, but seeing a return to form from the same developers was just plain old neat. Cave Story, oh man, this game got a remastered port on WiiWare, and this was a big deal as well. The indie game that was cool before being an indie game was cool. It made its very first ever jump to a console with updated graphics and music, with the original presentation there as an option as well. It was awesome. The Bit Trip series started off here as well, a group of 6 games that blended Atari 2600 pixel art with really trippy visual effects and rhythm-based gameplay. Most of the games had very different gameplay styles, but they still fit under the same mold, and it was just really cool. Runner, in particular, managed to get a few sequels as well, but it all started here on WiiWare. Lost Winds and its sequel, Winter of the Melodious, are really atmospheric 2D platformers where you use the pointer to control a gust of wind to help the main character move around the world. And similarly, Nick's Quest Kindred Spirits, which has the same basic idea, but it's level-based as opposed to Lost Winds' open world approach. And then just speaking of the pointer, you got World of Goo. This was a very interesting puzzle game featuring a really unique art style. And oh man, I've been waiting to talk about this forever. Strong Bad's cool game for attractive people. We'll keep this brief for now. Homestar Runner was a long-running series of web cartoons that I was a massive fan of, and out of nowhere, Telltale made a 5-episode adventure game based on the world and its endless list of characters, featuring the wrestler behind a mask who mostly answers emails, Strong Bad, and it was great. And I mean, come on, the game's title is Strong Bad's cool game for attractive people. How could you really go wrong? Nintendo brought out 2 big original titles to the service. First off, there's Fluidity, a pretty nifty puzzle game where you tilt your Wii remote to control a body of water to save this magical book from this dark evil goo. It's a bit over the top, but it's pretty fun. And then there's Bonsai Barber, and boy am I excited to say this next sentence. It is a game where you give fruits, vegetables, and plants haircuts. I mean, don't get me wrong, the game is enjoyable and does have a good amount of charm, but man, it's just weird. Nintendo would also go on to make a game based on their old Ultra Hand toy. Interesting idea, it was a Club Nintendo exclusive and I never picked it up. And then you got games like Rage of the Gladiator, a Punch-Out styled game that takes advantage of the Wii Motion Plus's capabilities. Chick Chick Boom, a really fun 1 versus 1 game where you try to kill the other team's army of bouncing chickens with a bunch of different wacky weapons. Jet Rocket, actually a fairly competent 3D platformer, which is always just nice to see. There's also Let's Catch, which is an odd one. You simply play catch with people, but it has a shockingly too real storyline. And by God, there is a penguin raising simulator with Snowpack Park. The Wii was a wild time. However, of course, there is another side to the spectrum, and yeah, like the Wii itself, there was a ton of crap on WiiWare as well. Just completing a very basic search, there was a whole series of games under the Family line. From tennis to mini golf to hosting pirate parties? What? This family either really gets around a lot or has a major problem trying to figure out one thing to do on family get-togethers. And I'm sure all of these games are an absolute blast to play, but I gotta be realistic here, I'm only gonna get 2 of these. I'm not much of a family man, I guess you could say. Okay, yep, okay, this is pretty bad. I mean, why would you play Mario Kart when you could play as my favorite character, Daddy, and beat mommy in racing? That sounds like fun. And also, I can't really trust a family who calls air hockey glide hockey. That's a big red flag right there. The more I explore the innards of the Wii Shop channel, the more I realize this is a very enlightening experience. I gotta find something really special to end things off with. This is the Wii we're talking about here. The releases on this console had no limits. It was a minefield that was only compared to like freeware PC gaming in the mid to late 90s. There has to be something absolutely crazy here. I don't know what's more concerning here, the lack of capitalization or the fact that it ends with an exclamation mark. This is not the name of a video game, this is someone shouting at you. Oh boy, wow, okay, this is, did not, you know what, don't get me wrong here, I really would like to play this. I believe I am the game's target demographic, I certainly do enjoy me some lovely manga-styled women, but I'm not about to get demonetized today, so whew, I guess we'll save this for another day. Oh yeah, here we go. Now this seems perfect. Muscle March. I think I'm actually upset that a game runs at 60 frames per second. A football player has stolen everyone's protein powder. Thankfully, someone's dead grandpa is here to guide us in the right direction. I guess I could try to explain what's going on the screen, but I think this is a perfect example of a picture being worth 1,000 words. I just really don't want the explanation of this game to come out of my mouth. Doesn't take too long though before you finally get your powder back and I don't know, save the world, I guess. So the Wii Shop channel. What a legacy it's leaving behind. It is certainly leaving one of those. Now before it is too late, there are definitely some games that are worth picking up. Quite a handful of quality titles are here, whether or not they were exclusive to this dying platform or not. And I am certain there is a few more that I simply missed. Thankfully, a lot of the really great titles are now readily available on other consoles and Steam. So even if these versions won't be available to be purchased very soon, they'll still exist somehow, somewhere. No real specifics here, just take a look at this footage of Echo the Dolphin real quick. Wii Shop channel, you brought us some great times, some weird games, a newfound love for retro titles. I wouldn't say the Wii Shop channel is gonna be missed, but it'll certainly be appreciated. Thank you, you blue shopping bags, and may you rest in peace. November 19th, 2006, the day the Nintendo Wii was released in North America, and the day the gaming world changed forever. That was over 15 years ago. Oh my god, Reggie's body may have been ready, but oh man, I don't know if anyone else's was. The release of the Nintendo Wii started a brand new era for the company. The GameCube, it was a great system, now that we're all looking back at it in retrospect, but at the time, well, you find yourself in last place, it's probably time for a revamp, you know? Simple solution to that conundrum. Let the big dogs Microsoft and Sony go head to head in a horsepower measuring contest, while we at Nintendo start appealing to parents and grandparents. Bold strategy, but it just might work. And it did work. Well, kinda. So yeah, I'm pretty sure we're all caught up with what the Wii is, right? I mean, Nintendo put out a white box, it came with the TV remote styled controller that you can play bowling with, and then it would go on to sell over 100 million units worldwide. One of the best selling consoles ever made is obviously nothing to shrug at, but is it really that big of a deal though? The Wii is in this weird place in history. No matter how much Mr. Reggie stated otherwise, a ton of those sales were from families that wanted Wii Fit, Wii Sports, Chicken Shoot, and that's about it. The narrative for the longest time was, nah, the Wii has nothing but shovelware and only kids and old people play those. Us real gamers only play on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. Yeah, you remember when Sony made like their own Nintendogs ripoff with their console, and then Microsoft said, hey, you know what? Controllers are stupid actually, here's the Kinect instead. The console wars are dumb. I've said this sporadically throughout my video making career, but the Wii may be my favorite console of all time. If the large collection didn't make that obvious. It used to be such an embarrassing thing to admit while that casual only narrative was all the rage, but you know what, man? 15 plus years later, nobody cares. I certainly don't care. The Wii is amazing. Nintendo officially unveiled the Wii at E3 2005 under the codename Revolution. We got a slick little black box here. There's a neat blue light around the disc slot. That's really cool. And not only did we see a logo that indicated the console would run Wii discs as well as these smaller GameCube discs, but the console was also somehow going to be able to run games from all the previous consoles too. A virtual console, if you will. The company may have been in last place at this point, but this was really the first time they were truly tapping into their legacy content, and that was really exciting. I mean, Iwata said that we'd be able to go back and play classics like Earthbound. You know, we wouldn't really get to that until 8 years later on the following console, but hey, it was the thought that counted. And then they also unveiled these weird controllers, and the console's new name was the Wii, huh? I gotta say though, for as confusing as the controller was, this initial showcase was killer. They packed in so many different potential ideas for the Wii remote, it just sold so many people on it. Not just with the B-roll of players having more fun with video games than I ever have in my entire life before this, but with actual gameplay footage too. A Mario game, a Zelda game, a music game, the Wii did it all. This controller is real, and not only can you conduct an orchestra with it, but shoot down alien scum in Metroid too. That's crazy. Such a good trailer. And they were gonna sell the console with Wii Sports, and of course there's the We Would Like to Play commercials too. Iconic, absolutely iconic. I still go back and watch these every now and then because they just get me hyped for this era of gaming. It's so good. Still waiting on that green Wii to show up. Once it does, ooh, you'll all be sorry. But then, well, that's where things get a bit strange. That dumb narrative about the Wii being only for casual gamers, well, it's not like Nintendo really did much to silence them. They would go an entire press conference at E3 with games appealing to the mainstream, showing a few PNGs of some mature games also releasing on the console that year, and then Reggie would go, "What do you mean? Of course we care about the hardcore gamers." Man, for a few years, Nintendo at E3 was just them talking about how much money they were making and then showing off games that people barely cared about. It was a weird time. It didn't help that the console also couldn't put out anything higher than 480p for its resolution. Now, I understand the reasoning behind this. At the time, not everybody had an HD TV, and Nintendo was trying to work with the lowest common denominator, but man, the lack of power really didn't do them any favors that entire generation when any game dared to go multi-platform. The online infrastructure was terrible too. Yeah, it was very laggy, and you know, sometimes you can get a good Mario Kart game going, but it was more often than not a total nightmare. But to be fair, to the Wii's benefit, since it was such a different vibe than the other consoles, that casual stuff was actually really fun. I used to spend hours making Miis, checking out other people's creations and trying to get random celebrities to play sports with me. I used to spin the globe in the news channel a bunch rather than actually caring about the news. I would flex my free speech muscle with the Everybody Votes channel with questions like cats versus dogs. Very important debate right there. I would spend dozens of hours browsing the Wii Shop channel, hearing that fantastic theme song while doing so. I would regularly tune in to the weekly Nintendo Week show on the Nintendo channel. It was like this weird half sitcom, half early Nintendo Direct thing that was very cheesy but also fairly entertaining. There was the internet channel, which you could also play flash games on websites that were designed to have games you could play with the Wii remote. That stuff was really cool. Oh, and all of the unique banners Wii games would have also. I loved these so much. Get a game that you're super hyped for, you pop it into the console, you've been waiting so long to play it, and that little banner is like the doorway that you still have to open before getting to that great game. Now, one might assume that the dreaded Wii controller gimmicks were going to be the primary thing that prevented the possibility of, quote, hardcore games releasing on the console. And I get it, you know? A lot of people assume that playing the Wii is like this. But in reality, it's more like this. We're not out here doing cardio playing Donkey Kong, get over yourselves. And obviously, nobody understood how to best utilize this brand new controller setup than the company that made the thing, Nintendo. Man, Nintendo's lineup on this console, they weren't messing around here. There are so many great games. Introducing a brand new way to play games with Wii Sports, a series of games that almost everybody already knows how to play, made learning how this brand new console worked super seamless. And even to access the game in the first place, you use this fancy little sensor bar to point to the game on the channel menu with the TV remote looking controller. Oh, it's genius. Come on now, the reckless Wii guy at the start of all of these Wii games has been trying to steer you all in the right direction since 2006. You should have listened to him. The virtual console feature was huge too. Downloading games directly to a console was a brand new thing back then, and clearly the shock and awe of such a thing was enough to justify selling NES Donkey Kong and Urban Champion for $5 each. Now on one hand, that is awfully money hungry, and I really don't condone that whatsoever, but on the other hand, I did buy them at the time. So I'm part of the problem. This resurgence of retro game hype is one of my favorite things from this generation. All of these brand new next-gen games were releasing, gaming was hitting the mainstream in a way that we had never seen before. But dude, did you know there was another 16-bit console that was right alongside the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis called the TurboGrafx 16? Well, here's Bonk's adventure. Learn something new, kid. They would occasionally make a big deal of releasing some Japanese ROMs for purchase as well with a premium price tag. It's just a standard ROM that you didn't localize. Why are you charging extra for this? Although I have to say, shout out to the N64 Virtual Console, still to this day, the best emulation Nintendo has ever provided for this console. It's a pretty sad state of affairs, all things considered, but hey, here we are. Also, do you remember when the Genesis version of Super Street Fighter 2 had Nintendo Wi-Fi connection support? But when you really take a step back and look at all of the proper games the company would release in the years following, it's honestly ridiculous. Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, easily some of the best 3D platformers of all time. They made one of the best games in its genre, and then did it again. That's crazy. New Super Mario Bros. Wii, a really great 2D platformer before they started shoving the word new down our throats. Trust me, at the time, this was cool. And also, the disc art is a big reference to the Super Famicom controller. That's pretty cool. There's your bit of trivia for the day. Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, an awesome follow-up that felt great with the Wii's pointer controls in my opinion. Metroid Other M on the other hand, I mean, yeah, not that great, but it's still interesting to talk about. Donkey Kong Country Returns, a phenomenal platformer that proved that retro studios could do a lot more than just first-person adventures. The Legend of Zelda, Twilight Princess, and Skyward Sword, two radically different approaches to the typical Zelda formula that, sure, now may have too much motion controls for their own good, and they are technically obsolete on the consoles they originally released on, but still, really good. Aw man, Kirby's Epic Yarn brought the pink puffball back to consoles with an amazing art style, and then we had Return to Dreamland come out the following year with a more traditional style, both games fantastic if you didn't know my automatic bias. Kirby even got a better anniversary celebration with the Dream Collection than Super Mario All-Stars simply being reprinted on a disc. That really sucked. It was just there to reconfirm to you which Nintendo franchise is truly superior. Super Smash Bros. Brawl was easily one of the most hyped games of all time, especially thanks to the Smash Dojo. And sure, the gameplay is definitely dated compared to Ultimate, but this is still packed to the brim with content. And it is also the harbinger for the Homebrew channel, but hey, we'll get to that later. Mario Kart Wii, Mario Party 8, not Mario Party 9, I'm sorry, that's just my opinion. Mario Strikers Charged, PokePark 1 and 2, Super Paper Mario, Battalion Wars 2, Big Brain Academy Wii Degree, Excite Truck, and more importantly, Excite Bots Trick Racing. The reboot of Punch-Out, Rhythm Heaven Fever, Sin and Punishment got a sequel with Star Successor, which is one of the best action games of all time. Wii Play Motion, Wii Sports Resort, and even Wii Party are three genuinely great minigame collections, and I know everyone thinks the Wii series is just for casuals, but trust me, these games are really fun. I really liked the new Play Control initiative too. That was a really fun venture. Yeah, the Wii could already play GameCube discs, I know, but what if we took a select few of the games and gave them native ports to the console while also adding some quality of life improvements and most importantly, Wii controls? What's that? We have the definitive way to play Pikmin 1 and 2 at a budget price? Donkey Kong Jungle Beat is fully playable without the DK bongos like a proper platformer? The first two Metroid Primes packaged with the third game for the Metroid Prime trilogy, one of the best values Nintendo has ever produced? Mario Power Tennis was pretty meh in that transition in all honesty. And Chibi Robo never even got localized. I can't imagine why this series never took off. But for the cup of coffee new Play Control was around for, I think we got a few really good titles. It's just, in retrospect, it's a real shame that we never got more out of this. Sure, Wind Waker with motion controls, people probably would have hated it back then, and especially nowadays. But it still would have been neat. That's all I'm saying. Let's be real here. Nintendo did try to sell us on accessories too, like the Wii Zapper and the Wii Wheel. Yeah, you remember when they practically gave Link a gun and made a game around it? Oh, good times. Actually, speaking of the Zapper, the Wii helped bring a handful of light gun games to consoles as well. There's the 2 Resident Evil Chronicles games, there's Dead Space Extraction, Ghost Squad. Not like you really needed the Zapper to play those, it was just plastic, but hey, whatever got more light gun games in people's hands, you know? Those are really, really fun. I did love when Nintendo was like, ah yes, Mario Kart, it's compatible with the Wii Wheel. It's a hunk of plastic. Technically, it's compatible with every Wii game. Wii Motion Plus, that was a big deal too. Motion controls always like, it kinda worked in most games. For what it's worth, in my opinion, the best part of the Wii Remote was the pointer controls, not the motion controls, but I digress. Once the Motion Plus add-on was introduced onto the scene, as well as the Wii Remote Plus proper, well, we did get Fling Smash out of it, so That's something. The couple of big games that used it did use it fairly well, but realistically, at the time, it was too little too late. Everybody had moved on. And especially now, in the world of super accurate controllers for VR setups, I mean, man, unless we get Flame Smash 2 or something like that in the near future, I think this battle is done. We did get some gorgeous Mario-themed controllers with this initiative, though, so... Oh man, these are good. Oh, and of course, what about the vitality sensor? Yeah, what about it, I guess? And sure, you go to a local Costco, you find a bunch of plastic that was meant to put your Wii remote into, and there was just a bunch of stuff all over the place. None of it was particularly good, but they worked, I guess, as intended. But no Wii accessory made a bigger impact than the balance board with Wii Fit. Yeah, you know, nowadays there are a ton of options to choose from, but this was easily the culmination of Nintendo's casual approach in this era. Of course, at the end of the day, nothing is really as effective as actually doing proper exercise or even playing Ring Fit at this point, but it definitely started to get a ton of people out of their seats and moving around a little bit. And hey, there are still a handful of proper minigames to play, and they're pretty fun too, so good stuff all around. This blending of casual appeal with proper original gameplay mechanics is one of my favorite parts of this era of Nintendo. Sadly, while a bunch of games would go on to use the balance board, aside from maybe Go Vacation and Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Winter Games, none of them were really all that enjoyable. Oh god, that's right, this is also the era where Mario and Sonic started working together for the first time. That is wild! Yeah, we didn't get the proper crossover that we all wanted, but I mean, the Winter and London Olympic Games are pretty good, so... you know, it could have been worse. Oh, and right, we did also get that full baby accessory. I don't want to talk about it. Operation Rainfall. Oh boy, what a time this was. You see, most of those heavy hitters from Nintendo for the Wii were released really early on, from late 2006 through 2010. As the years went on though, those releases started slowing down to a snail's pace, as Nintendo shifted development focus towards the 3DS and attempted to just let the Wii money flow in from people who didn't know any better. However, also at this time, there were 3 huge RPGs that Nintendo simply showed no public interest in localizing: The Last Story, Pandora's Tower, and Xenoblade Chronicles. You see, Xenoblade was initially going to get localized. At E3 2010, they did upload a trailer for a random game called Monado: The Beginning of the World. Didn't show up in their press conference, but hey, here's a video for the internet. And then soon after, the company acted like the game didn't exist, and wouldn't mention it for a long time. Thus began Operation Rainfall, fueled by anger from the community to get those 3 big games localized at a time where Wii owners were starving for new content. There were a couple of games to play, Kirby's Return to Dreamland, Skyward Sword, but really all the games that people cared about were once again few and far between. There were emails, online petitions, people were bombarding the company's Facebook and Twitter accounts. They somehow managed to force the Amazon listing for Monado to #1 on the pre-order charts, topping Ocarina of Time 3D. This was a really dedicated effort. Obviously, all 3 games did eventually release, 2 of them published by Xseed Games instead of Nintendo, and we will never truly know how much, if at all, Operation Rainfall played into things, but considering how common more niche Japanese games release on everything nowadays, and how Xenoblade has blossomed into an amazing series with multiple titles and a ton of representation in Smash Bros, it is really fascinating remembering a time where people had to really fight for these games. And, while on the topic of Nintendo shenanigans, realistically, a bunch of their offerings did leave a lot to be desired. Animal Crossing City Folk felt more like a port of Wild World than a proper evolution of the series. Pokemon Battle Revolution is a pretty soulless battling simulator lacking basically all of the charm of the Pokemon Stadium and especially the GameCube games that featured proper adventures. Donkey Kong Barrel Blast, games like Metroid Other M, Mario Party 9, Super Paper Mario, all titles that do have their fans for sure, but at the time, they were far too divisive, with negative effects still feeling relevant today. Wii Music, I mean, it did not take long at all to feel like Nintendo was focusing on the new controllers first and the actual games second. Because once Nintendo got their big ideas out of the way, the rest of their games either lacked polish or lacked proper marketing, leading to pathetic sales. Dude, okay, Sin and Punishment Star Successor is one of the best action games ever made, and like nobody played it, and oh, that's incredibly depressing. But now I want to shine a light on some of the third-party games that make this console library so special. You see, over the years, a lot of people will have you think that it's just shovelware from top to bottom. There are no good third-party games whatsoever. Maybe you play a Nintendo-made game here or there, and that's it. The people who say that are stupid. The thing is, at the time, the internet was starting to get a whole lot more robust, with gaming news sites keeping people in the loop. YouTube was starting to get a whole lot of traction, and as someone who was tuned into the system since day one, it became a lot harder for any quality games to go under my radar. And also, a lot of multi-platform games of this generation, of course, missed the Wii, but in its place, there were so many unique experiences you could only find on the Wii. This basically means that the Wii is a treasure trove of hidden gems as far as I'm concerned, and your only task is to sift through all of the Ninja Bread Mans and Anubis the Seconds and... oh god. You see the joke with that last one? Is Anubis the First genuinely doesn't exist? Boy, that company... What a bad set of games. Unless you really wanted an Elvis-themed platformer for some reason, then if so, these are your guys. It's not to say there were no big third-party games out there. We have the definitive version of Resident Evil 4 with simply divine pointer controls. That is still exclusive to the Wii. The original Epic Mickey was a huge deal at the time, and while that hype was definitely overblown, it's still a pretty decent 3D platformer. The same kind of goes for GoldenEye 007, which was really exciting at the time, but ultimately it was more so a Call of Duty clone than a proper return to GoldenEye. Still kind of a fun game though. No More Heroes, its sequel, House of the Dead Overkill, and Mad World gave the Wii a bit of a mature, bloody edge, while also providing some pretty satisfying motion controls on top of it. Sonic Colors was like the first universally praised Sonic game in forever, and it was exclusive to the Wii for 10 plus years. That's really cool. There was Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, an excellent arcade fighting game that is way more enjoyable than anybody expected it to be. Monster Hunter Tri brought the series to Nintendo for the very first time. Mega Man 9 and 10 may just be looked back on now as retro-styled games and that's it, but having a brand new title that looks and plays exactly like an NES game was incredible at the time. That was so cool. The big companies definitely supported the Wii, there is no doubt. Some companies even printed their games twice. You see, look at this, I got two versions of this Harvest Moon game, each with different disc art. Both of them official. Neat little pieces of the collection right here. And actually, the system was still getting games not that long ago. You remember when Just Dance 2020 released on the Wii and not the Wii U? Like, what, that is genuinely hilarious. But actually, at the time of this video, the latest games to officially get a release on the Wii were the indie games Retro City Rampage DX and Shakedown Hawaii, getting physical releases in July of 2020. They're sold out now, so good luck getting them, but they exist. This website says so. So yeah, where the Wii gets a whole lot more interesting is in the games that didn't get the attention that they always deserved. And now I'm just gonna go through a bunch of them. You remember that cruddy launch title, Red Steel? Yeah, most people try not to. Ubisoft are the undeniable kings of overhyping their own stuff, and this weird mishmash of FPS with sword combat is a neat idea at first, since it was a launch title, so that was kinda cool, but it is not good. Red Steel 2 though? Oh man, not only do we get a great art style now, but a combat system that actually blends the gunplay and the swordplay in an incredibly fun way, and it's like the only decent third-party use of the Wii Motion Plus accessory. This game is the comeback story of a generation. Muramasa the Demon Blade, excellent side-scrolling hack-and-slash adventure with a beautiful hand-drawn style. De Blob 1 and 2 are great color-focused 3D platformers with the funkiest soundtracks ever conceived. Rayman, Raving, Rabbids may have been the thing that helped put our limbless hero in retirement for a while, but hey, we did get Rabbids Go Home out of it years later, a really fun and wacky adventure where you're Rabbids in a shopping cart causing chaos in the real world and collecting junk to build a tower to the moon. Oh, it's a great one. I know the Rabbids are annoying sometimes, but they randomly decided to make a good one here before going back to making dumb party games again. This one's good, I promise. Maybe you're wondering why Mario Golf never made it to the Wii, especially when Mario Tennis did. And while that does kinda suck, in actuality, We Love Golf was made by the same developers, and you know, some motion control shenanigans aside, it's actually pretty fun. It feels like a proper Mario Golf game, just without, you know, the Mario part, which is why most people care about these games. There's Deadly Creatures, a game where you do some platforming as a tarantula and close combat with finishing moves as a scorpion. It is so dumb and stupid, it's amazing. The Munchables tasks you with eating a bunch of rogue fruit, and at the end of a stage, the more you poop on your grandpa, the more points you get, or something. Who cares, man? The game is a lot of fun. If you're into 3D platformers with a great sense of scale, well, Mushroom Men The Spore Wars let you jump around and slash enemies as a tiny little shroom in a big world. That's really cool. Dude, Little King Story. It's like this Pikmin clone, but the Pikmin have like a job system where you're building out your own little society and defeating these big scary bosses with remixes of classical music playing in the background. Dude, it's so cool. Little King Story is so good. Elebits is what happens when you give a kid a gravity gun and allows you to throw everything like an absolute maniac in an attempt to capture these little sparkling things. It's fantastic. Dewey's Adventure, made by the same developers, is an obnoxiously adorable platformer where you play as a water droplet with the power to manipulate weather to get past obstacles by becoming a cloud or a chunk of ice. That's pretty fun. Fortune Street, man. This one is technically third party, despite Mario being in it. This is a Square Enix title, and man, it is one of the best board game styled games ever made. Monopoly has nothing on this as far as I'm concerned, and considering the only Mario Party competition is 8 and 9, Fortune Street's better, I'll say it. Klonoa got a remake, A Boy and His Blob got a reboot, Sega revived Samba de Amigo, gave Knights a random sequel, Rodea the Sky Soldier is this really interesting case where it was sold as a Wii U game with a Wii version included, but the Wii game is actually a good one of the two, playing like a modern 3D Knights adventure, while the Wii U version is like shockingly bad. It's really weird. It's a story in and of itself, but that's a fun one. Zack and Wiki Quest for Barbarossa's Treasure is an excellent point-and-click adventure game with a great cartoony art style, absolutely bonkers scenarios, and one of the finest uses of motion controls on the entire console to solve specific puzzles. Really good. I am still a member of the hashtag #BuyZackandWiki campaign. Fragile Dreams, Farewell Ruins of the Moon is a great adventure, just oozing with charm and a really nice, lonely atmosphere, and tells an absolutely memorable story. And you know what? Let's go past the retail titles. Even the WiiWare service gave us some great hits too. Chick Chick Boom provides awesome multiplayer fun. Fluidity is another great use of motion controls where you tilt around the stage to move water. I loved that one. Excitebike got a pseudo remake with World Rally. That was a really fun one. The Art Style series gave us a bunch of quirky little puzzle games with cool, dare I say, art styles. This is where the Bit Trip series debuted, a set of 6 awesome chiptune rhythm games with a modern retro art style, and it's also one of the couple digital Wii games that would go on to get a physical release with Bit Trip Complete. That's one to search out for. Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles My Life as a King is way better than it had any right to be, considering WiiWare had a file size limit of 40 megabytes. How they got this whole game to fit into that, I have no idea. Muscle March, oh yeah. I have wanted to do that for a long time. The Wii's library is ridiculous. Like I said before, obviously a lot of the big third-party games didn't make it on the console, but that's fine, because what we did get, the originality is off the charts. And I didn't even talk about all of it. Now, with a good portion of those games like Little King Story, Da Blob, No More Heroes, Xenoblade Chronicles, a lot of those games have gotten ported, re-released, remade over the years, and that's all fine and dandy, but I'm just saying, the Wii is still the only place you can play Deadly Creatures, and I'm only slightly upset about that. But let's say hypothetically you've already played all of these games and you want something new and exciting. Well, I would be a fool to not mention this next part. One of my favorite parts about the Wii during its heyday was, of course, you knew I had to talk about this. Listen, alright, all I'm saying is there are multiple reasons why people were holding onto copies of Brawl all those years later, you know? Yes, modding a Wii was and still is a shockingly easy process, making emulation a breeze. And while I'm not about to be a big old advocate for piracy and stealing games, I will say the WiiWare service is no longer around. And while you can get some games on Steam or other consoles, so many titles that were released on that service are just unable to be purchased nowadays. And if you don't want to deal with PC emulation with Dolphin, I mean, hey, it's not impossible to play Contra and Castlevania Rebirth in this day and age, alright? You get it, you get it. If you are at all interested in the homebrew scene for the Wii, which is still fairly active, definitely check out WiiBrew.org, where people are still releasing software to this day. And for me, the most exciting bit of homebrew in the Wii scene, especially as of late, is the recent trend of fan translations for Japanese exclusives. Yeah, like I said before, with Operation Rainfall, some games did officially get localized, but now, thanks to some really dedicated fans, games like Captain Rainbow, Earthseeker, Fatal Frame 4, and Zengeki no Regenleave are fully playable in English, and they are awesome. Hey, did you know that there's actually a Pokemon Mystery Dungeon game that's exclusive to the Japanese WiiWare service? Well, guess what? That is in English now too. On top of that, a modded Wii lets you play games from other regions, so everyone in North America also owes it to themselves to check out Another Code R and Disaster Day of Crisis, the latter of which, by the way, was developed by Monolith Soft, the Xenoblade developers. That is so cool. It's also surprisingly easy to get access to mods and hacks, like newer Super Mario Bros. Wii, fantastic platformer, and CTGP Revolution, a Mario Kart Wii mod that you can actually still connect online with thanks to fan-run servers. And in fact, any Wii game can still be played online thanks to the same service. Listen, I understand, most people will only look back at the official offerings when looking back at a console's life. Makes total sense. But why would I lie to you and pretend like the homebrew scene wasn't a big deal for the system for me when I'm talking about my nostalgia? A lot of the same praise can apply to the advancements of that emulator, Dolphin. It is an incredible way to experience everything this console had to offer, with hundreds of customization options, and you can play online with games there as well. And to be totally truthful here, man, until Dokapon Kingdom gets a proper port while it's still hovering around $200+ on eBay, this is your best chance to play it, so go and do that instead. The Wii is filled with nothing but shovelware and trash. I understand, I truly do. I have been a fan of this console since 2006. I have seen all of the internet discourse since then. I get it, Though to be fair, I do kind of think a lot of the trash is part of the console's charm, Like I have all of these data design games like Anubis II and Ninja Bread Man, only spend 99 cents on them. Oh, and then Trixie and Toyland here? It's still sealed. Plan on getting this graded one day. The legacy of the Nintendo Wii is all over the place, to say the least. While leaving the gate super strong and selling gangbusters for a little while, it became very evident early on that despite what the company kept saying, the overall hype for the console was indeed a fad. Wii Sports, Wii Fit, maybe a Mario game here or there, that was really it for a lot of people. Some Nintendo games would of course sell better than others, but people like me who played the system regularly and kept up with the new releases, we were few and far between. We were not going to keep the console alive. On top of that, the lack of pure horsepower and actually big third-party games caused the Wii to fizzle out only a few years into its existence. It is definitely me looking back at this era with rose-colored glasses. I'm not gonna lie, the late 2000s are some of my fondest memories ever, thanks to the Wii, and to be fair, the DS as well, so maybe I'm simply speaking from a place of total bias here, but whatever man, shut up. I like video games. So, whenever I say that the Wii is one of, if not my absolute favorite console, I hope this retrospective gives a bit more insight as to why. There were a lot of things holding this console back, and there are definitely better ways to play a lot of the console's library, but looking at what this console gave us during its prime, from 2006 to like mid-2011 or so, it's incredible. It's incredible. What can I say? I love this Wagglefest machine to death. Let's rewind back to the year 2005. A traditional Kirby game was being developed for the GameCube. Not a ton of details are known about this outside of this trailer that was from that year's E3, since, well, you can assume it got cancelled. There were also two other Kirby games that were in development as well, one being a 2D platformer with a pop-up book art style, and another being a full-on 3D platformer. I'm still waiting for this one to be a reality, but altogether, that means 3 Kirby games were brought to life and then subsequently killed. But the end result of all that work, an actual finished game, Kirby's Return to Dreamland. One fine day in Dreamland, King Dedede and Bandana D are chasing after Kirby holding a slice of strawberry shortcake. Maybe a direct sequel to Squeak Squad in the official Kirby timeline, perhaps? Nah, who am I kidding? There is no timeline. After strolling past a surprisingly relaxed Meta Knight, suddenly a bright light flashes in the sky and a giant starship flies through, trailing smoke, and pieces fly off and spread everywhere. It's a terrible scene to watch. The 4 make their way to the crash site to the still intact ship's hull to find a knocked out alien still inside. The alien, named Magalore, has a major issue. 120 energy spheres that were kept on board, as well as 5 major parts of the ship, have been scattered to the 5 corners of Popstar. And being just the helpful ball of pink puff that he is, Kirby offers to help out, and the other 3 tag along for the ride. Now, why King Dedede would willingly put himself in harm's way for someone that he just met, I don't know, but hey, now we got some royalty on our side. That's the best I got. It's kind of hard to decipher the inner workings of a king penguin. Oh, wait, a king penguin, that's actually a thing. That makes a lot of sense now, actually. Now, with the title of the game being Return to Dreamland, that works from a gameplay perspective too. This is as traditional of a Kirby game as you could get. Running, jumping, floating, and the main collectible this time around come in the form of those energy spheres, a few in each level. And as expected, the game's structure is traditional as well. Each world has a specific theme and a little 2D hub area to go along with it, with each level being behind a special door, much like some of Kirby's earlier titles. They all have adorable food-based names as well, like Cookie Country and Onion Ocean, which is just cute. But what's kind of surprising, the little world-starting cutscenes, they didn't return. I thought those were really neat in the earlier games, but maybe that's just the Kirby fanboy in me, missing something that, realistically, is very, very small. And since the game is so traditional, it may be easy to just say the game is simply more of the same. A similar curse to the one that New Super Mario Bros. Suffered. But in reality, after over 11 years since Kirby 64, the previous console game in the series, and the previous mainline game developed by HAL, everything that this game has to offer has been polished to near perfection. Firstly, there is the return of the copy abilities, and what's great about them this time around is they all follow the Kirby Superstar model of each ability having multiple moves depending on button inputs and timing. This was sort of done in Squeak Squad with the ability scrolls, but nowhere near this level. And as a result, nearly every ability is useful for multiple different instances, rather than some only being good for a couple of sections. The in-air beam attack covers a good area in front of you. Being able to spin dash with the needle gives the ability some extra mobility. The same basically goes for Parasol, and well, really, the list goes on. High jump returns too, with the addition of a chargeable jump and a rocket dive, making even this ability more useful. As for brand new abilities, there's 4 of them. Harness the power of greenery with Leaf. Practice your jabbing or your tossing with Spear. Ride the waves and, let's be honest, basically become a waterbender with Water. And lastly, don an adorable cowboy hat, which I believe is what gives Kirby the power to use the whip. This is definitely a solid lineup of new abilities, way better than the few introduced in Squeak Squad, evidenced by the fact that none of them returned. Then on top of the new abilities, there's also these special objects that temporarily give you some extra firepower. There's a cannon that shoots fireworks, a candle to light up dark areas, a bomb that expands over time before exploding, a stone that makes you invisible, the Stomper Boot, which really, it's just the Karibo shoe from Mario 3, let's be honest, and a majestic French horn that shoots magical, dangerous water with, quite frankly, a beautiful rainbow pattern. Now these obviously don't count as copy abilities, but there is definitely a stronger emphasis in puzzle solving and obstacle passing thanks to these tools showing up every now and then without really needing you to have any specific ability, and that's, quite frankly, a nice change of pace. However, not only that, but in this adventure, some abilities get some special treatment. A super treatment, actually. Occasionally, a special glowing enemy will appear, and once inhaled, Kirby has access to a spruced up form of an existing ability. More importantly, a more spruced up form of an existing hat. Now, while there are 5 of them that act very differently, they all ultimately kinda play the same. In the area that you get the ability, there's a bunch of obstacles with star symbols on them. Activate the ability, get greeted with what is basically a Final Fantasy-esque summoning sequence, and destroy everything in sight. By the end of that section, you get access to an interdimensional portal that brings you to a special grayscale area where you're being chased by, I'm not entirely sure. I'm thinking it's just some sort of dark energy or dark mass. Granted, this isn't the first time Kirby's been in situations like this, but still. It's pretty bizarre. These lead up to bosses against these bird-like creatures called Sphere Doomers. They're all, honestly, pretty easy encounters, and as a reward for beating them, you get some energy spheres, and then resume your journey, not really thinking twice about how you just traveled to another dimension. Ultimately, each level tosses out some new ideas, whether it be using the super abilities or using one of those special tools. And in combination with the multifunctional abilities, this results in one of the most fun Kirby games in the series. The bosses have even been upgraded too. While you still can kinda just barrage them with whatever ability you have on you, they all have much larger health bars and multiple phases, so no more mindlessly attacking until the boss goes down. There's even co-op as well if you are so inclined. Not really my cup of tea to be honest, but it allows other players to control the other heroes on your adventure, which is just a neat addition.
Bandana D, away!
The soundtrack is fantastic as well, boasting the largest selection of songs the series has seen yet. And even graphically, the game does a phenomenal job. Bright and vibrant colors at all times, and if you ever actually stop and look at the backgrounds, they are typically shockingly well done, and you barely ever have the time to sit back and appreciate it. Naturally, there are a few sub-games as well, only 2 this time around. They can both be played with friends, and actually, they require motion controls. In Scope Shot, you shoot giant robots to destroy them piece by piece, and in Ninja Dojo, you flick the Wiimote to toss a star at a moving target. They're both alright, but really only enjoyable with other people, since they are primarily score-based games. But there are also a bevy of ability-based challenge rooms that test your skills with a handful of different abilities, and score your performance based on enemies defeated, hits taken, and overall speed. And I absolutely love these challenges. They practically require pinpoint precision, and it is really fun trying to master a Kirby game in that way. In fact, Kirby's Dream Collection features some challenge rooms as well. Yeah, this is primarily a collection of 6 classic games, but there's also a handful of brand new rooms with new challenges and even some races against Magolor. That's a pretty sweet addition if you ask me. Last up is the return of the Arena, a boss endurance mode that throws you at a lineup of bosses and mini-bosses. On top of that though, is the return of the true Arena. See, once you beat the main adventure, you unlock Extra Mode, a modified and harder version of that same adventure, featuring revamped and more difficult bosses, and even an entirely new boss, HRD3, which actually comes from that cancelled GameCube game. Pretty cool. And the true Arena is a lineup of those harder bosses. Time to wrap this adventure up. After getting back all of the pieces of Magolor's ship, he takes the band of merry heroes, we'll call them, to his home world of Halcandra. However, once they reach orbit, the ship gets blasted out of the sky by a crowned 4-headed dragon, Landia. Now, Magolor informs the gang that he needs the Master Crown retrieved, and the adventure continues. Once the dragon is taken care of, Magolor himself dons the crown and now plans to conquer the universe, starting with Kirby's home of Popstar. That's not like Marks at all. Actually, something that's kinda neat, the first letter of each world spells out the word crowned. You clever girl, you. Thankfully, Landia, now split into 4, offers their help to get back at Magolor. After a shooting section, which is honestly a great throwback to Superstar, it is time to destroy that evil alien for good. And the fight with him is very, very similar to the fight with Marks. You see, the comparisons don't stop. If it took you this long to realize it, yeah, Superstar played a heavy influence into this game. That's not all though. Magolor has a second form that naturally looks like some sort of hellspawn. Once defeated, the dimension that they were fighting in starts to shatter, but with the help of the Landias, the crew make it back to Popstar successfully. Landia, as well as Magolor's ship, the Lore Starcutter, which I guess is somehow sentient, fly back to their homeworld, ending Kirby's return to Dreamland. And no, Kirby does not get that piece of cake back. Return to Dreamland still holds up, and it remains one of the best games in the series. Squeak Squad is a perfect example of a Kirby game simply going through the motions. This is a perfect example of an evolution of the old school Kirby formula. Mario Party 9, also known by many people as the beginning of the end times. You see, since its inception, Mario Party was handled by Hudson Soft. I miss this B so much. It's not a series that got better with every entry, but fun could still be had with each of them. Mario Party 6 in particular, with the whole day-night mechanic, man, that is some top tier stuff. But once Hudson was bought out and dissolved by Konami, the reins to Mario Party was handed over to ND Cube, the developers responsible for F-Zero Maximum Velocity, Pool Edge, and Tube Slider. Something about this tells me that their track record is pretty inconsistent, but it was their work on Wii Party that made them seemingly the perfect fit. And while MP9 got alright reviews at the time, many series fans cite ND Cube's first entry into the series as the start of the apocalypse, despite there already being games that were... Why is there one on the Game Boy Advance again? I simply skipped playing this game for years because I just assumed it was bad based on what everyone has told me. Everyone seems to hate this game, but come on now, it's a Mario Party game. How bad could it possibly be? Mario Party has always revolved around one basic idea. 4 players get tossed onto a board, you move around at your own pace via dice rolls to get as many stars as possible, and react to whatever crazy shenanigans come your way. And boy howdy, are there shenanigans! But if getting all of your friends to come over and play a game of Monopoly doesn't sound like the most exciting thing in the world, that's where the minigames come in. At least once per turn, you take a break from the board game action and partake in a small competitive challenge. Each person for themselves or forming unholy alliances. These minigames are the glue that keep the entire Mario Party franchise together. Yeah, there is a lot of pure random garbage that pops up from time to time, but as a whole, it's awesome stuff. But it doesn't matter how good something is, you do that good thing too often and it's gonna start getting a little old. Okay, yeah, Mario Party 8 wasn't all that good. Not terrible, but its over-reliance on motion controls and each board changing up the core rule set, it didn't really sit well with fans. And between that and the whole developer change debacle, it seemed like it just made sense to finally change things up. Now, instead of each character moving individually on a large sprawling board, everybody moves along together on a short linear one. So, you know, it eliminates any form of strategy, you roll the dice and make your move solely as a reaction to what the previous character did. That's fun. Gone is the whole idea of collecting stars as well. This time the game challenges you to collect a bunch of mini stars placed randomly across the board, while also avoiding the stars. Never really got used to saying that out loud. And you just get them by rolling on top of them. There's no coins to really worry about either, so there's no sort of economy. I mean, I guess you can't have an economic crisis if there's no economy, so I kind of understand that logic. There are some board-specific gimmicks that do pop up occasionally, like these captain events where the crew perform a location-based game for mini-stars. The Bowser spaces return, with the consequences being way less severe than ever. Sometimes he even rewards you with mini-stars. That was weird. And there are these different dice blocks that you can get in an attempt to make you think about your moves before you make them, with them being now the only items that you get your hands on. But yeah, that's about it. Ultimately, you're simply at the mercy of the board and whatever moves your comrades make for you. The linearity and the whole everybody moving in one vehicle thing was probably done in an attempt to make the game go by faster as well. Boards honestly only take about a half hour to complete now, if you're lucky. But even still, the game somehow moves at a snail's pace, making this both faster and slower than the previous games, which, to be fair, that's a bit of an accomplishment. Why isn't that on the back of the box? Well, since the board game gets rid of the whole idea of turns, that means there are no end-of-turn minigames. That's fun. So now instead minigames just kind of happen whenever the game feels like it? You often go through multiple dice rolls with no minigame in sight. It gets so bad that the game ends up taking pity on you and literally pulls a minigame out of nowhere to play. But to be fair, credit where credit is due, the minigames are fine. No matter how soulless the boards are, at least the mini games were enjoyable enough to pull me out of the dead of sleep. And boy, let me tell you, if you're hoping for just a little bit of nostalgia towards Hotel Mario, Mario Party 9 may just be the thing for you. The motion controls are kept to a minimum, many of the minigames are skill-based, which is nice. If the boards themselves offered more competition, these would fit right in. It's just really hard to care about winning when everybody who attended gets their own set of mini-stars, and since they're the same collectible as to what you find on the board, as opposed to winning currency to purchase the main collectible like we're used to, it all just ends up feeling pretty pointless in the grand scheme of things. The addition of boss battles is pretty cool, I'll admit. You know, it's nothing too groundbreaking, but they're still enjoyable, and they do at least add a little something to the game's story mode. You know, it wouldn't be a Mario Party game if it didn't have some sort of arbitrary way to experience everything if you have no friends around, and this is fine. The evil Bowser is up to it again. This time he's stolen all of the stars from the sky. Get them back. Cool. And then you just play all of the boards in order. Okay, the minigames are truly the only saving grace here, and the boards are just so painful. To ever think about playing them again, it just sounds like torture. And let me be clear, it's not just because it's different than the formula that worked so well for many years prior, because I get it. Realistically, by the time Mario Party 8 came around, people were getting tired of the typical Mario Party formula, so changing things up made sense. However, all of these changes lost what made this franchise so special in the first place. Any heart and soul that made Mario Party famous or infamous is gone. Aw man, you know what? This minigame is just too much fun. If only there was an unlockable mode that made the camera worse. Oh good, that's a thing. Super Smash Bros. Brawl, aka the bad one, I guess. It's a requirement to clarify that whenever you mention this game's name. Within the grand pantheon that is the Super Smash Bros. Series, Brawl is easily the most controversial. But in terms of the amount of content to be found here, Brawl is really impressive. Super Smash Bros. Is a multiplayer fighting / party game. Cool, but single player modes in multiplayer based titles is something that I was always a big fan of. Games like the earlier Mario Parties or Crash Team Racing. Yeah, they're very clearly based on multiplayer, but there's a huge single player component as well. That's awesome. And while Smash Bros. Melee did have that really cool adventure mode, Brawl did something a bit bigger, a bit grander, and to this day, it is still one of the most ambitious things Nintendo's ever done. It was your ordinary July 20th, 2007, over on the Smash Bros. Dojo, your source for all things Brawl updates, when suddenly this bombshell dropped on us, revealing something. It took a while to really click what they were going for here, but man, when they did finally show off what Subspace Emissary was gonna be, hype thrusters for this game were sent into overdrive. And this was no mere side game that you complete in a few minutes and move on. Hey listen, as cool as Melee Adventure Mode is, this was practically an entire game within a game. A full-blown platformer beat-em-up hybrid, we have characters properly interacting with each other rather than simply fighting. Damn, we have an original story too? You know, I remember the initial loading times for this game being a lot more annoying, but after the Wii menu sound inflicts you with temporary deafness, I can appreciate the extra time for my senses to return to normal. At the core of Subspace Emissary, what Nintendo gave us was a super fleshed out form of that initial idea of a kid playing with a bunch of Nintendo toys. Oh man, what if Mario and Kirby fought, right? Well, that's how this story starts. Clearly, that's not a coincidence. But you know what would also be a really cool fantasy that would be better than having your favorite characters fight each other? Having your favorite characters fighting together against a big mysterious evil, against a force that uses these special bombs to remove areas from the real world and throw them into the void of subspace, something these characters are not normally up against. Things are different in this world. The characters that you're used to are all essentially, dare I say, spirits of trophies that come to life for battle, and as such, they don't necessarily have to follow the canon of their respective series as you know them. All of these different Nintendo characters live in the same universe here. Sure, whatever. They simply want to make sure their world doesn't get screwed up. Not even 5 minutes into this thing, the sky goes dark and the arena gets invaded by shadowy creatures. A mysterious orb drops from above, only to be revealed as a ticking time bomb after being opened up by a couple of Robs. And after Mario gets blasted into the sky, Petey Piranha shows up captures both Princess Peach and Zelda, and Kirby takes it upon himself to fight back. And it is awesome. Admittedly, after playing Ultimate for so long, going back to Brawl, with the classic controller no less, since I'm playing this on a Wii U with no GameCube support, is pretty jarring, but I am far too busy being in awe of what is happening on the screen here to care. As you progress through the story, it is a tidal wave of fan service in all shapes and sizes. Pit and Mario exploring the Skylands, watching an R-Wing go after the Halberd, Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong attacking Mario enemies trying to steal their bananas. Lucas, after seeing Ness gets shot with a trophy gun by Wario, runs into the Pokemon trainer searching for his missing pocket monsters. And oh boy, that moment when the ancient minister is revealed to be a friendly Rob and you can immediately play as it. Every time a new character shows up, we get one of those sweet intro banners. This stuff is so cool. Not just because these things are happening, but because we have these beautiful CG cutscenes to go along with them. There was clearly a lot of time and effort to make sure these cutscenes looked good, and some of the characteristics that we are familiar with shine through. Princess Peach offering Fox a little bit of tea, pretty adorable, not gonna lie. And don't get me wrong here, World of Light was kinda cool, but anything interesting that you did came off as like an animated GIF on top of a large map image. I know it's all subjective, but when you really start comparing the two, one of these things is a lot cooler than the other. Here, things actually happen, and even if the characters act slightly different than how they're presented in their origin games, it's just really cool, man. Now, I could be cynical and grade all of these interactions and talk about how these characters should be portrayed, but the Nintendo fanboy deep within me is just a big fan. That's it. I want to see more. It's as simple as that. I'm sorry, but Captain Falcon accidentally killing a bunch of Pikmin while Olimar watches on completely emotionless? Yeah, this is what I live for. When we do start looking at the actual content of what this mode offers outside of the fan service, well, that's where things get a bit muddy. Playing Smash Bros. As a platformer actually works out pretty well, but the level design isn't going to win any awards. This was probably to accommodate how different everybody feels, but it gets the job done. Doesn't explain why there are so many auto-scroll segments though, and something else that is a bit disappointing, while the beginning of the adventure throws you into locations that feel like proper Nintendo worlds, that feeling is pretty short-lived. You got the sky from Kid Icarus, a forest from Donkey Kong, the insides of the Halberd, that's really cool. Generic ruins, generic plains, generic caves. What happened? And going up against a new evil that's exclusive to this mode is fine and dandy, but when some of the enemies consist of Mario characters like Bullet Bills and Hammer Bros, I can't say I'm not upset we didn't see more. Adventure in Melee had some Zelda enemies thrown in that led to a really cool level, and Smash Run on 3DS actually did exactly what I wanted by throwing in enemies from like every single Nintendo franchise. But here, the enemy variety just isn't there. And I get it, the level themes sorta match the darker and grittier aesthetic that the entirety of Brawl had going for it, but some extra iconography in the back of levels or something like that would have been appreciated. Link and Yoshi explore a forest. The music makes it seem like it's Kokiri Forest, but visually, nothing. A remix of the Ruin theme from Super Mario Land plays in the Ruin stage. Why not throw in some stationary enemies back there to just acknowledge, hey, we actually remember that game existed. And hey, we even got boss battles against Ridley in 2 incarnations, Rayquaza, and Porky of all characters. Why not throw in some more? Listen here, this is the same team who made a post-apocalyptic version of Super Mario Bros. 1-1. My suggestions are really not that far-fetched. But even though it isn't perfect, I can't help but think that it is still a pretty engaging adventure from beginning to almost end. None of the stages outstay their welcome, and you're usually offered a different lineup of characters to choose from every time, so things are kept interesting, at least on a gameplay front. It ends up being even more compelling on a fresh save file too, since meeting the characters here was an alternative way to unlock them in the main game. That's really cool. There are also collectible trophies and stickers all over the place to add to your collection, and even a special item, the trophy stand, that you can throw at weak enemies to turn them into trophies, which is pretty clever and makes some of these collectibles feel a bit more important. But like I said, this is mostly engaging until the almost end. Yeah, this part of Subspace I think people remember most. Near the end of the adventure, all of our heroes join together and get transformed into trophies once again, requiring you to free them. And once you save everybody, Except for Ike, because I missed him somehow. He's just gonna stay there, that's fine. It's time to tackle the Great Maze, a massive structure at the core of Subspace where the true evil can be found. You see, throughout the story, we do see some notoriously evil characters be antagonists. Wario, Bowser, King Dedede, that makes sense. But it turns out they're all taking orders from Ganon, who's actually taking orders from Master Hand, who is actually taking orders from this mysterious figure, Taboo. Sure. Whatever, I'm fine with it. It just really sucks that after a lengthy series of linear levels, you now spend at least an hour and a half running across familiar themes and level layouts, opening doors, leaving no stone unturned just to tackle a creature you were just introduced to. Find a door, go through it, hope a character is there, beat them up, and rinse and repeat until you have them all done. They restrict your character choices to 4 too, which really doesn't make any sense. In the previous stages, they're treated like normal levels, so dying was, of course, a possibility if you weren't all that good. It's guaranteed, there is no way you're not gonna die when you go through this maze. It's not as terrible as some people make it out to be, but it is undoubtedly a pretty boring climax. The final battle against Taboo is kinda neat, I guess, but once you beat him, the locations go back to normal and everybody gets to resume with their lives. Except Ike, he's still trapped in there. The credits then quickly show up, and that's it. You're thrown back into the main menu like nothing ever happened. Oh, and yeah, Sonic shows up literally right before the final battle. In a pretty odd move as well, there are 3 extra unlockable characters that you can only find after beating Taboo. Yeah, it's strange. After doing that, you have to go to 3 different levels and suddenly there'll be a door where there wasn't one before, and then there's a really cool cutscene introducing one of the characters. You fight him like normal and that's it. But why? Link and Toon Link on the same screen? That's unheard of. But all in all, The ambition behind Subspace Emissary cannot be understated, and all these years later, it is still an enjoyable time. Yeah, the cutscenes are definitely a huge reason why this mode is as cool as it is, but it's pretty fun to play as well. As time went on, more Smash Bros. Games would release, and I don't know, man, nothing they've done comes close to what they did here. The fan service in regards to enemies was really strong in Smash Run, like I mentioned before, but that's about it. And while World of Light does have a lot of cool nods here or there spread throughout its 150 square mile map, it really just doesn't compare. But to be honest, I guess it was kind of foolish to expect that too. Subspace Emissary happened at the right place and the right time. Brawl really felt like they were going above and beyond, adding as much as they physically possibly could. So this massive adventure actually fit right in. With Ultimate, more emphasis went to showing support to as many franchises as possible, even if it's as small as a single spirit or an assist trophy, which is still fantastic, but I would argue that there is still a void left to be filled. Brawl has an entire 8-hour campaign within it, or 177 hours if you forgot to turn off your Wii, featuring a ton of Nintendo characters working together to defeat a greater evil, and it was really cool, but call me selfish, I want more. Damn it, I love this game, and Subspace Emissary is one of the reasons why. It's awesome. You remember when Sakurai said he didn't want to do a story mode in Smash 4 because the cutscenes would have been uploaded to the internet? Man, it's at the tip of my tongue. What is that feeling I'm feeling right now? Oh, that's right. Sadness. The Olympic Games as we know it has been a mainstay in global culture for hundreds of years, and as such, it should be celebrated. With Super Mario and Sonic the Hedgehog. But why though? This is a series of games that exists. Initially, I thought this was an April Fool's joke. This was the year 2007 we're talking about. Everybody was still begging for Sonic to be in Smash Bros. And while that did end up happening on October 10th of that year, and a younger me at the time lost his mind as a result of this video, this image here appeared on the internet on March 28th. I was very much waiting for Sega to say haha and call it April Fools. This is real. There are 5 of these games. How? With each Olympic Games, a Mario and Sonic title was there, ready to go as well. The game starts off with this opening video that honestly is pretty fantastic. Sega's CG movie team at the time was top-notch, and even though it really wasn't the way anybody wanted, seeing all of these characters from both universes together was really cool. And then you dive into the actual game itself and, So, as you would expect, this is a minigame collection, with all of the Olympic events being the minigames. And you can choose between some of your favorite characters from the Mario and Sonic universes to play as. And Vector is also there. You can play as your Mii as well, but that's really not something I care about. The whole series has this feature actually, so if that's something that you're interested in, cool. Similar to a typical Mario sports game, each character has its own unique stats. Though really, it doesn't matter a whole lot as long as you play the game well enough. For the events, you got racing, long jumping, archery, hammer throwing, trampoline stunts, and a whole lot more. There's swimming as well, and honestly one of the best parts of the entire series is Sonic wears a little floaty when he's in the water. I mean, just contrasting that to Dr. Eggman wearing his entire getup when he's underwater, I feel like one of these two is not doing something correctly for the Olympics, but I can't tell which one is worse. There is sort of a Mario Kart style of progression here, with a bunch of different cups housing different games, and you get rewarded with trophies at the end for doing well as getting access to another cup. But honestly, the events here, they're not that great to play. We're looking at a minigame collection on the Wii in 2007, everybody. Prepare to shake the controllers at any moment's notice because that is going to happen a lot. Yeah. The thing is, given the console at the time, I really wouldn't expect anything else, but it doesn't make this any more fun. And Yoshi winds up for the swing, he's waiting for the right moment. Due to the controls being what they are, the events really aren't all that enjoyable. Sure, there is a bit of a novelty to it, but it wears off pretty fast. The soundtrack, on the other hand, is shockingly awesome. Aside from the traditional Olympic events, there are also these special Dream events, which, in this first version, aren't really as special as you would come to expect. They're just these really bare-bones minigames that try to spice things up with a couple of little Mario and Sonic elements in there, but like the rest of the events, they're really not all that fun. The later games do a much better job with this idea. And why not have a little bit of filler content as well? Last up on our list is this weird take on providing Olympics trivia. You see, you have a couple categories to choose from, and the game will ask you a question, but rather than just answering it, you're required to play a really garbage minigame. And then you get the answer. Cool. But on the bright side, I now know that Oscar Swan was the oldest person to win an Olympic medal at the 1920 Games in Antwerp. Antwerp? Would you just call me a twerp? And that is the first game in the series. Again, it was a really cool idea, finally having Mario and Sonic in the same title, but the final product that we got, it was pretty uneventful. Now we have our first trip to the Winter Games, and almost immediately it is clear that the presentation was kicked up quite a few notches. The opening movie is way better, the UI is cleaner and has a bit more personality, and the in-game graphics are a lot sharper. Credit where credit is due. Also, the first game presents itself in this weird aspect ratio that normally you won't see because I'm stretching the video out, but this is what they both look like when they're not stretched. 2007 was a weird time, I guess. Oh man, I got mail from Omo Chow. I thought I blocked him. And wow, this game has balance board support. I guess one day I'll talk about the balance board, but not today. Today is not that day. But soon. Soon. Since these Olympics take place in completely different weather, the events that you partake in are brand new. There's downhill slalom, large hill jumping, racing on skis, and you can't forget about the figure skating. Just look at how beautiful this performance is. Wait a minute, you can play as any of the characters in these, right? Oh, baby, yes. The most notable improvement here is the games are actually fun. Rather than having a ton of games that either required the waggle or other motion controls that just tended to be kinda finicky, many of the games here are based on tilting the controller or traditional button controls, and it actually feels pretty good. You do sorta have a good feeling of impacting the character's movement at all times, and while the games aren't really all too difficult, they are way more enjoyable than anything close to the best of the first game. There's even a pretty solid game of ice hockey in here too, for some good multiplayer fun. As for the single player, this time it is structured as a proper Olympics festival, where you will either practice or perform the different games themselves on a day-by-day basis, bookended with opening and closing ceremonies. And there's even the occasional boss fight in here too, of all things. You got the likes of King Boo, Rouge the Bat, there's a giant Bullet Bill. It's not the most creative that you threw in there. It's just a bullet bill that's just big. You're not even a bonsai, but okay, that's fine. And then we move on to the dream events, and now we're talking here. Rather than the mediocre fare of before, now there is fan service aplenty. You can race down Seaside Hill, ski jump through Good Egg Galaxy, have a gliding dogfight in Sky Sanctuary before Sonic Generations brought this place back. Or you could play ice hockey in Bowser's Castle, but more specifically, from Mario Kart Super Circuit. Because why not? There are 11 dream events here coming from the first game's 4. And man, for both of these franchises, these are really good ways to celebrate their treasured histories. And not only is the soundtrack pretty good once again, these dream events also began the trend of these games housing some fantastic remixes. Some of the tracks are ripped right out of the original games, but most of them are brand new and they sound great. The true highlight of all of this is Dream Figure Skating, featuring 2 full multi-part shows, one for each series, and it's just really neat. Like Sonic's, features a fight with an icy chaos. I love that so much. There is another group of these unnecessary minigames that are purely just filler for whatever reason that are here, but I can look past that. This game overall is actually pretty good. It is still a minigame collection, so take that for what you will. All I'm saying here is one of the events is curling, and I never thought I would ever have a good time partaking in curling, but by damn, I did. We're only 2 games in and this series already took a pretty big 180 in terms of quality. It's time for game 3. Starting off, there is another fantastic opening video. I know it's pretty redundant at this point, me saying that, but man, these are just getting better with each one. Now the curious part about this game, God, I thought I blocked you. The curious part about this game is it is a return to the summer games, which we already covered, meaning some events are bound to return. And yep, yeah they do. For many of these, rather than just blindly waggling the controller once again, there is actually some timing involved. It's a relatively small change, but it ends up making for a big difference, as these are far more enjoyable events. The running events are still waggling though, but now you can just use the Wii remote, you don't need a nunchuck, so huzzah! Probably the most impressive change is with ping pong. It is disastrous in 2008 with really wacky motion controls. But this time they managed to make it fun. And thankfully there are plenty of new games as well. There's uneven bars, equestrian racing, badminton, beach volleyball, and football, for more multiplayer good times. To be fair, we are in London this time, so we can't go around calling it soccer, so fair enough. And there's also synchronized swimming. It's, yeah, I don't know. This is a bit too weird for me. You know what's not too weird for me, though? Ribbon twirling as Bowser. The jump in quality here really cannot be understated. Not only does it look way better, and the soundtrack continues to be shockingly really good, but the events are genuinely fun. I think it really all comes down to how much you care about motion controls, because like winter games before it, they're really not all that difficult. I just end up enjoying playing what's being thrown at me. And if you thought with a sequel that the Dream event would be better than ever, man, you were right. And like before, the fan service is kind of the reason why. These are barely even recognizable from Olympic events at this point. There's seeing who can get the farthest in a land based on Yoshi's story, riding discuses in Windy Valley from Sonic Adventure, cooperatively riding horses to safely bring Yoshi eggs to the finish line in Moo Moo Meadows from Mario Kart Wii, competitive trampoline stunts in Crazy Gadget from Sonic Adventure 2, and the music that accompanies all of them, oh man, it's so good. Once again, these are easily the best part of the game. There's one short of the number of events of the last one, there's only 10 dream events here, but they are still all a good time. The biggest downside of the game though is there's really no real reason to play the events. They're all unlocked from the start, which is great for multiplayer, but there's no single player mode incentivizing a reason to play every event. You get a little graphic for doing all of them, but that's really not enough for me. Instead, there is this new London Party mode, and I played it, but I still don't really have a good idea what the hell it is. It's like a group of 4 characters run around aimlessly in, I guess this is supposed to be London, I mean Big Ben is there. You perform these odd little tasks and occasionally jump into proper events, and you do all of this to collect stickers to fill up a sticker book, and the first person to do so wins. Not to say that it is totally void of fun, it's about as much so as that weird mode from Smash Brothers, so your mileage will vary here, it's just not something I was expecting. So that concludes this series' time on the Wii. Now the first game is once again good. But honestly, if you do want to give the series a shot, these are not bad games to check out. They're legitimately good minigame collections. I don't know why the case for 2012 is yellow. Yeah, I got nothing on that. That's just a weird thing. Wonders Beyond. Do you get it? It's WB because white and black was relevant at the time. The story begins in the pits of hell. Didn't see that coming. Here we have the legendary Pokemon Reshiram and Zekrom telling of a forthcoming disaster that is going to destroy the world, but a lone light nearby may be able to rid the darkness. That's a pretty dark plot for a Pokemon game, I'll admit. I'm more so questioning how these two are communicating when they are very clearly so far away. Does that power come from being a legendary? I need to know. On a lighter note, Pikachu and Piplup from the first adventure are off to PokePark to play once again. When they arrive, they overhear some other Pokemon hyping up this new spot, Wish Park. They even got this little seed shooting carnival game there. This place can't be that bad. This place is pretty bad. It turns out there are these other evil Pokemon in Wish Park hypnotizing the peaceful Pokemon to have them live there forever, leaving the PokePark void of any residents. Before our heroes become the next victims, they, along with new friend in tow, Oshawott, attempt to escape. Pretty intense too, they run for quite a while and they're doing a pretty good job of it. Well, aside from Piplup. He was too slow, so he sacrifices himself for his friends. You see, this is a bit of character development, actually. They established early on that Piplup was slow, and then it played effect into the story not that long after. That's good storytelling. From there, the adventure is set. You go on a journey, make as many new friends as possible along the way, cause that matters in this game, I'll get to that in a bit, and stop Wish Park before it's too late. Making some buddies to stop a world-ending disaster. Sure, I'll accept it. That is basically the same as how the first game worked. Friendship truly conquers all, and I feel disgusting saying something so lame. At this point, you kinda just run around to wherever the map points you to, talk to any new Pokemon that you find along the way, usually fulfill their little task they ask you to do, and you just keep doing that until the credits roll. And on this quest, you explore a different set of parks than last time. There's a sunny beach side sitting next to a populated city, a cozy little grassland surrounded by pure nature, a rocky mountain that's dry on one side, cold on the other, and a train station that hides a science lab deep underneath. And if anything, once again, this is where PokePark shines. Being able to play as an individual Pokemon in a full 3D world, getting to interact with other Pokemon who are just living their normal lives, that's pretty cool, and I wish a lot more spin-offs in this franchise did something like that. The rest of the game? It's not as cool. The big difference this time around is the addition of 3 new playable Pokemon. Throughout the adventure, you make friends with Oshawott, Snivy, and Tepig, the Gen 5 starters. Am I the only one that misses the fan-made name Smugleaf? Anyway, they each have their own set of abilities to help out with traversal and puzzle solving, like swimming, jumping higher, and bashing rocks. While some special items keep themselves in positions that require these characters, it really doesn't make the game feel any different. You can swap between any of these characters on the fly, but the goal to make as many friends as possible, that remains the same. And speaking of being the same, the friend-making process is actually a damn near copy and paste job from the previous game. The different tasks that the Pokemon ask you to do to become friends with them run the gambit of chasing them, partaking in a quiz, the occasional game of hide and seek, maybe even a bit of a platforming challenge from time to time, and naturally, some battling. So yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. There is the element of type weaknesses this time around since you have 4 different Pokemon to choose, but the game is so easy and the battles are so button mashy that ultimately it kinda doesn't matter. There's sometimes a side-scrolling section here and there, that's pretty different. Some of the items that you collect, they're not from the first game, so that's kinda different as well. You see, this is how the first game worked too, but at least there, we kept working towards those minigames, where the friends that you make along the way were able to make an impact in your performance in said games. If you wanted to get the highest score possible, you couldn't do it with Pikachu, you had to get someone bigger and stronger. Here though, ooh, they goofed up pretty bad. So each segment of the map includes a portal to Wish Park, only accessible by befriending enough Pokemon. When they choose to go there, your new friends proceed to give Pikachu all of their energy. The gang then enters the park. I know the joke here is that friendship is powerful and transcends all evil and whatnot, but this is ridiculous. Once we make it back to Wish Park, we learn of the ones behind the evil plans. It's Gothorita, Gothita, and Gothitelle, the entire evolutionary line, under the command of Darkrai, and alongside them, other spooky-looking Pokemon. And well, they can't have you stopping them in their plans, of course. Thankfully, each of them, in order to stop you, has a fun and quirky minigame. That should get the job done. That was sarcasm. These minigames are a much bigger deal this time around. They're what's in between you and this bell that unalienates the Pokemon in that section of the park. The story's fine, and I enjoy Pokemon enough to where interacting with a bunch of them from Generation 5, my favorite gen by the way, kept me through to the end, but I just couldn't help but feel let down here. It's a game about making friends, and the most interaction you have with them is beating them up. Thankfully though, Croagunk returns, so it's not all bad. Eventually, the gang finds a mind-controlled Piplup in Wish Park, and after a battle with it to try to set its mind straight, Darkrai causes your new friends to suffer amnesia. They all get sent back to PokePark, and everything is all grayscale all of a sudden, and Pikachu is far too sad for a game like this. Wow. Oh god, and it's raining too. Oh, of course it is. Man, this got depressing real quick. But it's okay, Piplup is actually totally fine, and thanks to his motivation, you run into your other friends and get them back on your side. You all travel back into Wish Park to encounter Darkrai. 2 button-mashing battles later, Darkrai is finished, and is surprised at how powerful all of their friendship is. During this, a dark vortex has popped up into the sky and is slowly growing, and in an attempt to stop this, all 4 main Pokemon simply have to ring a bell at the same time, and that should work. And of course shenanigans happens, but before disaster totally strikes once again, Darkrai actually sacrifices himself with this special light orb that he got. Naturally though, we can't leave any potential friend left behind. We find out that we can save him through the power of Reshiram and Zekrom and the 3 nature legendaries, Tornadus, Thundurus, and Landorus. After the game concludes the first time, another segment of gameplay that takes up like another hour or 2 of time, clearly in an effort to just pad the game out longer, which, you know, that's neat, ends with Pikachu then battling the 2 major legendaries in question. And once they are defeated, they accept that Pikachu is doing the right thing. They use their combined power to bring back Darkrai. Oh, and the credits? Okay, I assume we saved Darkrai. I didn't edit that. The credits pop up that quick. Oh, phew. Okay, the post-credits show that we did in fact save Darkrai. Phew. That's a relief? The story is surprisingly a mouthful, but to be fair, that's really all this game has. So going into it, I really didn't think it was going to be that different than the first game. The first adventure seemed like a bit of a minigame collection that had this explorable world there to glue everything together. Here in the sequel though, it emphasizes the whole friend gathering aspect of the first game, but it just kinda has minigames there because the first one had it, so we may as well. Now personally, I did prefer the first game more. Since the second one boils down to really just being more of the same with less minigames and more playable characters, it kinda feels like they tried to complicate the core experience just for the sake of it without really focusing on the fun. Now don't get me wrong here, now that I've covered both games in this illustrious side series, I can easily confirm that now both of these games really aren't that good. There is some enjoyment in the simple act of exploring a Pokemon-filled world, but there's just not much game here. There is an element of, alright, let me just get one more friend and then I'll stop, since there are so many Pokemon to befriend, and if that does sound interesting, they may be worth checking out. And if you do so, congratulations, you're one of the select few in the entire planet who's gone through the effort of playing both games. But here's the thing though, not many other people seem to talk about these games anyway, so I don't really know what the general consensus is on which of the two is considered better, but I can tell you this much, even though I didn't love these games, or like them for that matter, I'm still glad I got to play them. The Pokemon franchise is vast. There are so many games out there that are not the typical core RPGs that we see on handhelds, so any chance I get to tick a couple of those off my checklist, that's time well spent in my book. With the mass appeal of motion controls and the immense hype of the Wii in 2006, the pivot to a minigame collection as a launch title for the console made perfect sense. I'm just sad about it, you know? Rayman's just out here one day chilling with... Dear God, what are those? Are those supposed to be the Glowbox children from Rayman 2? Are they diseased? And then, the Rabbids show up. They take Rayman, imprison him, and force him to have fun for their entertainment. Oh, how diabolical. What ensues afterwards is a few dozen minigames utilizing a bunch of different abilities of the Wii Remote, from pointing, to tilting, to waggling until your wrists give out, and everything in between. And it's fine. I've made it no secret in the past that I am a big fan of gimmicky BS with my video games. The Wii is one of my favorite consoles of all time, so I know a thing or two about crappy minigame collections, and I can tell you this much. This is one of them. I am willing to give the first Raving Rabbids a bit of a pass here when it comes to many things. For one, once again, it is the very first one. There is plenty of time to screw things up in the future. The Rabbids aren't unbearably loud yet, Rayman hasn't been completely abused yet, and for what it's worth, the minigames are actually pretty enjoyable. The story mode boils down to games having very forgiving score goals, so you're in and out of games pretty quickly. And the more you progress, you actually get to see the Rabbids that initially root against you start to root for you, even celebrating your mere existence in this big ol' stadium that they can afford somehow, which is impressive given we also have all of these on-rails FPS segments where you basically kill them all with a plunger gun. They're awfully forgiving and stupid, aren't they? They've been brain dead since day one. But little do these dumb Rabbids know, at the end of every single day, each plunger that they provide you is one day closer to freedom. One day, Rayman, one day, we will be free. The costume idea from the prototype is here as well. Look at that, fun little things for Rayman to get himself into, how fun. It's like Mario Odyssey so many years afterwards. However, unlike the prototype where it appeared to change the mechanics, here it's just the aesthetics, but hey, it's funny, right? Grandma Rayman, Gothic Rayman, Gangster Gangster Rayman. Oh no. It's okay, don't mind that. Watch Rayman dance to legally distinct covers of popular licensed music like Girls Just Wanna Have Fun. Hooray. Hey, fun fact, did you know that the 360 version of this game is actually part of the Xbox backward compatibility program so you can play it on your Series X? No problem? Thank God for video game preservation, am I right? The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. You want to talk about being divisive in the Zelda franchise? Well, boy howdy, look no further than here. I feel like for most other 3D Zelda games out there, you can find some pretty healthy debates on the good and bad sides to each of them. Wind Waker's water traversal, the 3-day system in Majora's Mask, Midna being objectively the best partner Link has ever had. That is a fact, it's been said in a YouTube video, so it is the absolute truth. Skyward Sword though, bring up the controls just for a second and the pitchforks come out. I am really simplifying the conversation here, but ultimately I have one goal with this video. Skyward Sword HD is finally here, and one of the selling points of it is an attempt to mitigate a lot of the issues people had with the original release all those years ago. Is Skyward Sword actually good? Now, full disclosure, for most of you out there, the Switch version will obviously be the one that you're familiar with, because the old version is stupid and old. I get it. But for the footage in this episode, I ran the original Wii version through Dolphin to make things look, you know, at least kinda similar to the official HD product, so bear with me here. Oh, but Ant, this means that you're playing the games with the terrible motion controls. Come on now, they're terrible. Okay, so a bit of a different take right off the bat, I guess. I actually really like the motion controls, and for me, they played a crucial part in my initial enjoyment of the whole game. Motion controls on the Wii were always very hit or miss, but when specifically talking about Wii Motion Plus, well, I mean, we got Wii Sports Resort, Wii Play Motion, Red Steel 2, of course Skyward Sword. When developers knew how to fine-tune things to their favor, we got some really fun and immersive experiences out of this technology. We did also get the Garfield Show Threat of the Space lasagna, but you know, you take the good with the bad. This is also the only big Zelda game the Wii could call its own, so its use of motion controls isn't really that much of a surprise. A game like this was something people were begging for ever since the Wii was initially a thing. Yeah, there is Twilight Princess as well, but I mean, come on, technically it's still a GameCube game, and I don't think anybody cares about crossbow training, so yeah, Skyward Sword it is. I often see the game's issues boiled down to two primary arguments. First, obviously, the controls. Now, points to the Switch version immediately because that game includes the ability to do motion controls with the Joy-Cons as well as standard controls with the Pro Controller or in handheld mode. That's awesome. You whippersnappers out there don't have to deal with this adventure being motion controls or bust anymore. As much as I did enjoy the controls, having more options is never a bad thing. They did the same thing to Super Mario Galaxy when that was ported to the Switch, and I think that is realistically the best approach to take when it comes to official ports of Wii games. But regardless, a ton of the mechanics here were made with the sole intention of making you really feel like you're Link. If I were to be so dumb and cliche, swinging the sword by swinging the controller, doing an underhand swing to bowl a bomb, tilting with really fine detail to maneuver a flying beetle. These are all things that I love, but I could never fault others who couldn't look past it. At this point, your whole life, you're probably used to playing Zelda a specific way with a specific control scheme, but even still, many preferred Twilight Princess on GameCube over Wii simply because they didn't have to move their hands to do attacks. The motion control stuff was always the afterthought in my opinion. The pointer controls, that's what shined in these Zelda games, and that's why gyro is so good in modern Zelda games. That being said, I'm not really sure why some act like these sword controls result in you needing to swing the controller like you're overly caffeinated. No, like, if anything, for the most part, combat in this game is designed in such a way for you to be slower and more thoughtful in your movements. So taking out enemies that block some directions and not others is actually really satisfying. The Lizalfos always block a specific direction, you got these three-headed lizard things that have a specific direction you gotta swing in. That stuff's pretty cool. Oh, and those eyeball doors to where you gotta swing the sword in a circle to make them dizzy, that stuff I really like. But looking past that, I mean, there are mechanics like swimming by tilting, shaking for extra stamina boost. Stabbing is the one element of Wii controls I was never a fan of. I can swing in any direction I wanted to and it worked perfectly every single time, but if I ever had to stab something, I could never get it to work. After going through the entire adventure all over again, it does at times feel like Nintendo was more focused on getting as many, quote, immersive opportunities in here without factoring in how fun they actually are. I just never want to carry pumpkins ever again, you guys. And arguably the best thing to come out of the controls for this game are the controllers. Getting that beautiful golden Wii remote for the original release, these Sword and Shield Joy-Cons for the re-release, oh, they're gorgeous. And actually, this reminds me, this means the Switch version lacks the how to set up your Wii Motion Plus video from the title screen. Can we really call the HD version the definitive one if we don't have the Wii Motion Plus instructional video in it? Nah, realistically, Nintendo also probably wanted to re-release this just so they can have a version of Skyward Sword out there without a game-breaking bug in it. Yeah, for those not in the know, in the original, if you do one of the final missions in a very particular order, you can lock yourself out of progression. It is really close near the end of the game too, and that sucks. It's easy to pull off, but thankfully easy to avoid as well, and since Wii games could not be patched, Nintendo actually released a save data saving channel, still downloadable off of the Wii shop at the time of this video by the way, that will patch your save data to fix things. But thanks to the Switch version having the new button controls, that leaves the second primary argument against Skyward Sword. The adventure is just too repetitive and otherwise uninteresting, and this As much as I do like the game, I can actually get behind this idea. Outside of the main village of Skyloft, there are only 3 primary locations: Farron Woods, Eldin Volcano, and Lanayru Mines. And in my opinion, the game has a great art style, so it makes it kind of exciting to explore these areas. This sorta mishmash of Twilight Princess's realistic proportions, Wind Waker's bright and vibrant color palette, and you throw in a watercolor finish, the game looks really good. But when you look past that, these are pretty uninspired locations, to be honest, with only a couple fascinating set pieces and charming new species to call their own, and compared to other locations from past Zelda games, it doesn't really amount to a whole lot. Listen, I will protect a Kikwi with my life, but for the most part, meh. Grass area, desert area, lava area. Again, some cool stuff happens within them, but overall, they're just very uninteresting. And it is a damn good thing Zelda and Groose are such strong characters too, man. Design-wise, the residents of Skyloft and some others across the skies are varied and interesting, but it is a fairly bland cast of characters. On my revisiting of this adventure, I remembered most of these people based on how they looked versus what they actually do. But thankfully, we have the high school movie villain with Groose and the grounded childhood friend of Zelda with a much greater calling in life to give you just enough motivation to see where these characters will go as the adventure progresses. There are reasons why all these years later people are still upset that Groose never made it into Hyrule Warriors. You have probably heard people say at this point that this Zelda is one of the best, and yeah, that still holds true. This character is fantastic. She does try to kill you once or twice, which is not something I would be looking for in a friend, but hey, I actually want to save her after she gets kidnapped, so I think that's a job well done. Not as good as Spirit Track Zelda, but that's neither here nor there. But when it comes to those 3 different areas throughout the adventure, you explore them 3 different times. And every time you return, they expand a little bit, usually leading to a new series of challenges or dungeons, and that idea is neat. You know, let's try and really give these areas a lot of depth and intricacy as it evolves over time, but it actually has the opposite effect. It kind of makes it feel like the world runs out of interesting things to do once you're 1/3 of the way through the game, and it just hopes that you can look past it. It does not help that backtracking is also done via air travel with your loft wing, very clearly in my eyes trying to recapture the magic of Wind Waker's ocean, but I don't know, it just doesn't hit as good. It is really hard to top a mechanic that houses one of the greatest video game music tracks of all time, to be fair. Also, is it just me, but doesn't the loft wing look like a less cartoony version of the bird from Mario Galaxy 2, which released around the same time? I think Nintendo's trying to tell us something, I'm just not sure what. There are some interesting islands scattered throughout the sky, usually housing a fun minigame or a character that might have something for you to do, but more times than not, you just go from Skyloft to one of the glowing pillars of light over and over and over again, making things feel super linear, and yes, it does get old. And it makes the adventure feel like it goes on for 10, maybe 15 hours too long. In my opinion, it never feels like you're exploring a world, you're just going to different levels, and I'm not really sure how many others will agree with me on this, but when a Zelda game doesn't really feel like you're exploring a cohesive world, that is definitely a disappointment. And then there's the matter of your partner, Fi. I don't really think she's as annoying as many others claim she is, but if her endearing character trait is supposed to be just constantly assessing situations with percentages, as well as occasionally stopping you in your tracks to warn you about things, then yeah, I'd rather go this adventure alone, honestly. That being said, if you can look past those issues and focus on the dungeons that you eventually travel to, then oh boy, okay, this is where Skyward Sword really shines. The dungeons are so good. It's probably no real surprise dungeons were always a Zelda highlight, but for all of the missteps Skyward Sword has taken, dare I say, some of these dungeons are the best in the entire franchise. The Ancient Cistern, dude. Oh my god, this is the one! It's the best! You got this huge statue that really holds some great secrets when you're outside it trying to figure out how to manipulate its location going up and down, and you have some really fun water traversal, satisfying swinging mechanics, and this is also where the game's art style shines the brightest as well. The contrasting cool and warm colors, the watercolor effect looks fantastic here, it's just so good to look at. When people debate what the best dungeons of individual Zelda games are, this is definitely in that conversation because man, it is so good. Second to that though, in my opinion, are the time stones in the desert dungeons because ooh, this is such a cool mechanic, dude. Hitting them changes the time in the surrounding area with some elements like enemies and doors being active in only one time frame and not the other. And when you're in the sand ship and you gotta find these really clever ways to hit the one time stone that's all the way at the top of the boat through windows and stuff like that, oh my god, it's so cool. The ball rolling in the Earth Temple is really fun. I won't even get into the tile swapping stuff near the end of the game. I gotta keep some things spoiler free here. But yeah, man, overall, fantastic fantastic dungeon lineup. It also helps that the bosses are really fun too. Like I said before, the combat is designed for you to be more thoughtful and methodical in your movements, and attaching that idea to the typical Zelda boss design of using the item you just got in the dungeon to expose their weaknesses, it makes for some really memorable encounters. Not necessarily difficult, one of the issues that plagued Twilight Princess's bosses is here as well, but you know what? I don't care. Koloktos is an amazing boss, and he's in the Ancient Cistern. Another reason that's a top tier dungeon. I'm pretty sure I'm preaching to the choir here, but ripping off his limbs and using the giant swords to slash this huge creepy metallic beast to shreds, every single boss in this game is great. Except for the imprisoned. You knew I was going to talk about this. You put him right there next to the pumpkins, man. If I never have to deal with him one more time and his big wiggly toes, I will not be upset about it. Man, having a boss that you fight in the overworld is such a cool idea. Why did we waste it on this giant fuzzy bean? I am also a big fan of these silent realms they start implementing partway through the adventure. Once you start returning to the 3 main areas, the game expects you to really know them inside and out, because now you gotta run around them itemless in order to collect tiers. Twilight Princess throwback, I see you. Except this time you get to live out everyone's nightmares of being chased by something big and scary, and yeah, better hope you don't touch water or get caught in a spotlight, cause then you'll wake up the bad guys and they'll kill you. But it's funny because this is one of the segments that I hear people complain about a lot. A lot of people apparently don't like the Silent Realms, but I do. These are some of the best areas in the game for me. Like I said before, this game is pretty divisive. Now the Tad tones on the other hand, yeah, these suck. They're terrible. Put them right up there with the pumpkins and the imprisoned. I never want to do this again. Skyward Sword is in this weird gray area. The dungeons are fantastic. A lot of the motion control inspired mechanics are really good, leading to some of the best moments of the game. But as a whole, the adventure, it's just kind of meh. In my opinion. I have to say in my opinion, otherwise a lot of people are going to get more mad at me than they already will. Obviously, it all boils down to just how much these are issues to you, but the repetitions in some of these locations, the linearity to get where you need to go, Fee holding your hand when things get a tad too confusing, the most disgusting amount of backtracking I have seen in this franchise. It doesn't make the game bad, but to say this is a mid-tier adventure would be really putting it lightly. The most freedom you get comes with these side quests and the collectibles, and this whole thing is just kind of okay. You got materials and catchable bugs all over the place, which allow you to upgrade items and potions back in Skyloft. Neat idea. Maybe more useful in the harder hero mode, but otherwise, a pretty unnecessary feature. You could upgrade the slingshot to fire more pellets at once, you could upgrade the net to be bigger when you want to catch bugs, you can take any potions that you buy and make them more effective, but because the game is so easy and straightforward as it is, you never really get to appreciate these upgrades or wish that something that wasn't upgraded was. Like I said, cool idea, but in execution, pretty unnecessary. And then you got the gratitude crystals, the reward that you get for helping out other people in the village. Or, like, finding them scattered around in the grass or something. I don't know, maybe the lawn is happy and it's grateful for it. I don't understand this part. This is where the villagers really get the chance to show some personality, and it is a fairly decent effort at that. You gotta help Fledge deal with his stamina issues. You gotta find this baby's rattle. You gotta clean this woman's house. Scar this love-struck schoolboy for life by either forcing him to watch the girl he likes get with someone else, or you partner him with a ghost hand instead. You know, the typical Zelda flair. But, back to the original question, is Skyward Sword actually good? Well, yeah, duh. Obviously. Objectively, this is a fantastic game. Whether or not you agree with some of the directions the game took, that is a totally different topic. The dungeons are great, the mechanics are solid, the main characters are super likable, the art style, fantastic, but overall, I do think this game is overall pretty mid in the entire scope of the series. And that's okay. The best part about Skyward Sword being on the Switch now is there are far less excuses for first-timers to give this adventure a shot and come up with their own conclusion. Considering the original release is one of the worst-selling games in the franchise, there are more Zelda fans out there that have not played this game than you probably think. And while internet discourse might have you believe that this is easily the most hated game in the franchise because it's terrible, it's bad, it's stupid, Fee is dumb and won't shut up, I also know that for many others, this is actually their favorite. And from a conversational point of view, I can and will always appreciate, for the entire series really, that the community can look at and play the same thing and have such wildly different reactions to it. As long as you're not mean about it, it is worth having that conversation. Like, personally, I would say Wind Waker and Twilight Princess are better than Skyward Sword. It'll always be hard to top those in my opinion, but I also think I would be more willing to give this another playthrough before going back to Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask. That last sentence just invalidated the entire video, didn't it? Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot, this is a Rabbids video. By this point, the Rabbid takeover has gone worldwide. Nobody is safe from the Rabbid epidemic. Rayman, amazingly enough, just leaving them be without destroying them has massive repercussions. Wow, I can't believe it. Now look at them, they're trying to learn human culture. That can't be good. But thankfully, to make up for his past mistakes, Rayman is here once again to stop the evil villains. By pretending to be a Rabbid the whole time. I hate this is gross, he's already been relegated to simply being a skin of a generic Rabbid, I'm gonna die. Yeah, it's another minigame collection, alright. You still got plenty of motion control shenanigans, that Ubisoft money means more Rabbid remixes of licensed music like Funky Town, and even the FPS segments are back, but this time, they take place in the real world. Graphics will never get better than this. There is a fundamental difference though. Rather than the minigames being goal-based like the first one was, they are score-based in Rabbids 2. Most of the minigames are just every player playing at the same exact time, competing for the high score on the same playfield. And I don't know, that's a lot less interesting to me. One of the minigames is literally just hold the Wii Remote and nunchuck to your temples. That's it. Maybe it makes for a more enjoyable multiplayer experience since you don't have the other players waiting for you to finish your turn, but surprisingly enough, none of my friends said yes to would you like to play Rayman Raving Rabbids 2 with me in the year 2024. I will say though, the Jackass reference, kudos. That was funny. But man, why did we have to dumb down Rayman to get the point across? Like, come on. He's just a bumbling idiot now, like, I get it, it's funny, the Rabbids can't tell it's you, but why are we doing this? Rayman Raving Rabbids TV party. Oh, look at that. The Rayman part of the logo is getting smaller. That's reassuring. Yep, the Rabbids are still taking over. This time they're invading our TVs. Oh, okay, hey, look at that. The little guy's messing with the TV settings. Oh, stop messing with the screen, you silly goose. We're 3 games in and I'm already running out of things to say. Once again, we have found ourselves in another minigame collection. And fans of Toxic by Britney Spears, myself included, because of course, oh boy, are we ever in heaven here. I mean, I guess there is the television theme now, but that only pertains to the menus. Everything else is just another Rabbids game. But with a thinly veiled story of Rayman simply living in this log cabin with an annoying TV on at all times that he can't leave for some reason. Okay, I guess that's not entirely true. Sometimes commercial breaks pop up mid-minigame that will give you a perk if you succeed at them. This actually isn't the first time I've talked about TV Party either. I've talked about this game in the past in my balance board episode. Because yeah, still the only interesting thing about this game, it actually works with the Wii balance board. Okay, well, works is a bit of a hyperbole. Certain minigames recognize the balance board. Whether or not they actually work as advertised is anybody's guess. But in this instance, I'm anybody, and my say is no, it doesn't. But hey, at least there's the peeing game. The following release was Rabbids Go Home. Alright, fine, I can't keep up the facade anymore. This video was just an excuse to go back and play Rabbids Go Home. Just being honest. Rabbids Go Home on the Wii is sick. And I still can't believe it. In an attempt to keep the Rabbids fresh, this group of developers decided to take those loud, dumb, furball idiots that just like playing minigames all the time and put them on a grand adventure. And even before the adventure starts, you can tell this game cares, man. You're in the process of checking if your controllers work, nothing unusual here, but oh, there's a rabbit in the controller. A little bit of abuse in the name of love never hurt nobody. Not like they can feel anything anyway. And okay, sure, the goal, straightforward, get to the moon. How do we do that? Well, naturally, load up on your shopping cart, head down to the human-infested mainland, and collect anything and everything you can possibly get your hands on and bring it back to the mountain to stack it all up in one vertical line. It's like that one episode of South Park. No better place to get your inspiration, honestly. This is truly the most devastating, unnatural force imaginable. Gotta talk about the humans real quick because their existence in this universe is hilarious. To quote and paraphrase the development team, the humans in this world were meant to be the exact opposite of the Rabbids. They have their emotions in check, their organs have atrophied, and they've nearly forgotten they have a body or a heart and can barely handle those. The Rabbids, on the other hand, represent emotions pushed to the extreme, and this dichotomy is meant to be an allegory for the, quote, internal debates that we have with ourselves each time we make a decision. Brother, this is a game where you can take a dying man and shove it down a pee-filled toilet. This ain't Shakespeare. Let's look past the deep-rooted philosophical undertones of Rabbids Go Home real quick. The game kind of goes for the Katamari idea of you being a tiny ball of destruction, causing havoc for everything in your path with next to no penalties for your actions. The pure satisfaction of picking things up and watching everyone around you fear for their lives with the jazz music in the background, it's so much fun. It's insane. What are you stealing, you may be asking? Well, nothing's off limits. The first mission has you go for this, like, little UFO thing. Not sure what that is, but that's fine. And there's just the right amount of keeping things interesting too. From these little cutscenes where the Rabbids are introduced to the new toys for the first time, to occasional new gimmicks for certain stages, like these rideable jet engines, inflatable tubes, and even some honest to goodness platforming. Every level is exciting. A couple times you also unlock a mini game when you finish up like an entire segment of worlds. There's one time you get to do a Simon Says game, and then another time you get to make incoherent music, and by doing so you unlock an additional hit point for your Rabbids, and then you move on, never to do those games again. Okay, and hell, I even like the Rabbids in this one. I'm not even upset that Rayman's not in. Okay, well that's not true. I'm still upset about Rayman not being a thing anymore around this time, but hey, I like the Rabbids. That's a miracle. You're even able to customize your Rabbid too. Dude, yes. Listen, it's not precise whatsoever. You're restricted to the pointer controls and some very minor like rotation, and you can shrink objects and whatnot. Like, it's very basic and rudimentary, but I kind of prefer not having precision with this. Like, I just want to make him look as dumb as I possibly can. Look at this. I made Sonic. There he is. It's Sonic. Did you know that there's this menu that contains pre-made Rabbid designs unlockable via super secret cheat codes? It's a bunch of classic Ubisoft characters like an assassin, the Prince of Persia, the Splinter Cell, a Capri Sun pouch, Best Buy employee, Geek Squad employee. A while ago I talked about the dying man, right? Which is already hilarious because it's actually a reoccurring gimmick in this adventure and is one of the reasons you could do some actual platforming by puffing the air out of this dying man's. Okay, that's hilarious. What about the literal only room in the game that is a morgue filled with literal dead bodies? You see, this is what happens when you don't respect the pouch. Even the art style that they use for the level opening cutscenes, like, it really goes to show that no matter how unliked and soulless something can appear, if you put that property in the right hands, you can truly make something special. The 100% reward is worthless, so don't even worry about getting a perfect score in all the stages. It is not worth it at all. But if you're worried about being a completionist in a game like this anyway, you're in the wrong department, I'm sorry. The DS game may still just be good at best, but I dare say that Rabbids Go Home is one of the most fun experiences you could find on the Wii. And if this is the brand new future for this franchise, I gotta tell you, I am super excited. God, because we're not allowed to have nice things, I guess. Raving Rabbids travel in time for the Wii. Oh, the raving word is back, I noticed that. Raving Rabbids travel in time for the Wii is just, it's just another minigame collection. I mean, like, the production values are a lot higher than TV Party. Like, genuinely, the game does look and run the best out of any of the games we've covered thus far, but this sucks, man. Once again, I'm well aware there are people all over the world who grew up with these games, and more power to you, but you gotta understand. It's very clear I've succumbed to some kind of syndrome seeing this franchise brutalize Rayman and then gaslight me into thinking that the one time they tried with this franchise, hey, you know what, it didn't happen. Back to the basics. And this is the first minigame collection in this list that has Rayman off the title. I suppose, ultimately, this is my favorite one of the bunch, barring Rabbids Go Home, but the bar is pretty low. The time travel gimmick barely makes sense either. Like, yeah, you teleport for each of the games, and maybe there's a cutscene indicating that you are, in fact, in a different time period, but all of the previous games are all over the place too. Doesn't really matter. It doesn't nail the gimmick as strong as TV Party did. Do you ever get yourself so deep into video game collecting that you fall into these really crazy rabbit holes that when all is said and done and you finally complete the set that you've been going for, you sit back and you think to yourself, hey, how can I possibly rationalize this? Well, I own the complete Cooking Mama series, so let's talk about it. You've heard of Mama, right? Of course you have. Nobody is better than Mama. Master Chef, gardener, crafter, Bitcoin miner, babysitter. Wait, what? But maybe now you're thinking, oh, you must have missed some because there's also the console games. The Wii probably offers unique experiences. No, Cooking Mama Cook-Off may as well just be a port of the DS game with, quote, better graphics and often very broken motion controls. Send help. Whatever, man, at least I can still make a mean meatball. The biggest innovation with this one is the multiplayer, where you can partake in a cook-off, there you go, I get the title now, against chefs from other parts of the world, or, if possible, real-life people. Cooking Mama World Kitchen? Oh, okay, this is like a self-insert now, I guess? Okay, there we go, that's me, I'm a chef now, look at my hat. You know what, I will say this much, it is finally nice to visualize the fact that Mama is actually never cooking the meals, she just keeps telling you what to do, constantly cracking the whip to make sure you don't screw up. Now you can actually see what that environment is like. It is the most different looking game of them all, but it's, Man, it's the same as it's always been. I mean, at this point, I don't think anyone's surprised. The world kitchen part of things just means that you sometimes make international meals. Also, we got product placement now from Nestle for chocolate. Oh man, you know what? It took them long enough to get real products in here. You ever lose your egg yolk while cooking and then you have to race your dog to get to it before they do? Obviously you have. That is cooking 101. The more absurdity this series has, the better, but there's just not enough of it here. They didn't try hard enough. It's the same game over and over again. Oh my god. I'm a proud mother. You see, owning babysitting mama is one thing, but being told that after putting in the disc that you have to take a Wii remote and then you just stab it through the back in order for it to work? What? Choose a baby. Oh man, I can't decide. All right, first and foremost, you gotta learn how to rock a baby to sleep. Fair enough, that is parenting 101. Good babysitters never shake the baby. This is reverse psychology, isn't it? Rock the baby, feed the baby without drowning it, burp the baby. Oh man, this is gonna be a long day, isn't it? I mean, I guess in an attempt to strictly garner to a child demographic, then I suppose I can see the appeal in this one. This is the only mama game where you actually get a peripheral to make things feel accurate. Surely diaper changing is as easy here as it is in real life, right? I think parents can agree with me on that one. Diaper changing is one of the easiest things you can do as a parent. Mama makes it seem like that, and why would she lie? It is very important not to shake the baby. This is the only advice you have for me, isn't it? You know, there's nothing like playing with your baby when your less favorite kid starts burning the burgers. That kid sucks. Okay, now pay attention. This is the most important part of babysitting, okay? You have to work on your cardio. You have to. Who knows when your idiot kid is about to destroy the kitchen? You have to be prepared at all times. Ooh, eventually you get access to other babies too. Glad to see this babysitting gig is a scalable business for Mama. Good for her. She's an entrepreneur. So, all in all, babysitting Mama is probably the best Mama game in the series. I mean, when it really comes down to it, having an accessory to go along with the game, it does make things a little bit better. You know, having a gardening kit with gardening Mama would have made that game better. So by proxy, sure, babysitting Mama is a dumb idea, but it's ultimately a pretty fine enough time. So good on you, I guess. Again, Wario Land 4 is still a great game, but its similar in style sequel and the current final game in the franchise, Wario Land Shake It, or the Shake Dimension in Europe, probably a better name, I think handles things much better. For one, this is the first time a Wario Land game was made by someone other than Nintendo. Here we have Good Feel. Yeah, the same Good Feel that would later on make Kirby's Epic Yarn, as well as Yoshi's Woolly World and Yoshi's Crafted World. This is where that team got their foot in the door, working on a Nintendo property. And they clearly wanted to leave an impact too, man. Look at Wario's butt. As you can tell, the game also features a hand-drawn art style, even including a few actual anime cutscenes animated by the big animation studio, Production IG. There's not many of these cutscenes out there, but what's here is really, really cool, and definitely makes me want a full Wario cartoon. I've said it once, I will say it 1,000 times. Stylized graphics for a platformer I will take any day over the standard uninteresting 3D of something like New Super Mario Bros. That's an easy shot to make, I get it, but still, this game looks great. The evil Shake King has stolen the legendary treasure, the bottomless coin sack, as well as kidnapped and imprisoned most of the tribe of Murphles, and on top of that, their queen, Merelda. The sole remaining Murphle is also here, and he explains the situation to Wario and begs for his assistance. And also mentions treasure. Wario is in. At this point, it had been 7 years between entries in this franchise, but even still, Shake It plays very similar to the games before it, following mostly in Land 4's footsteps, by having a strictly linear structure, as well as the return of the countdown feature at the end of mostly every level. You shake the container freeing the Murphle, and then you gotta bust a move back to the start. And remember now, this is a Wii game we're talking about, you gotta get some Wii remote shaking going on here too. They did call the game Shake It for a reason. Those Europeans with the Shake Dimension title, oh, they must have been shocked that there was motion control in this game, they didn't know. Small price to pay for having a better title. One swift Wii remote shake and Wario will pound the ground with incredible force. Grab onto anything you like and shake the Wii remote a bunch to get every little bit out of it. And then when you're done, do a little bit of tilting to aim your throw so you can dispose of it like the trash it is. For core gameplay, I actually think all this stuff is fine. I would prefer an option for traditional controls. You know, it's the same reason that it sucks that Donkey Kong Country Returns on the Wii requires motion controls for movement options, but for what's here, it's fine. It's when they throw in these weird vehicle gimmicks like the flying rocket bucket and the underwater submarine that also use the tilt controls, but the entire time you're in them, yeah, that gets kind of annoying. Also, there's no widescreen in this game. Really? Mario Party 8 did the same thing. You know, okay, I get it. Not everybody had a widescreen TV in 2008. Nintendo was very clearly going for the lowest common denominator at the time, but it's really weird they just slapped borders on the sides and called it a day. But overall, this is definitely the most traditional platformer in the series, lacking most, if not all, of the absurdity these games have been flourishing in up until this point. That being said, it's still really fun. The variety is definitely there. Combing through the levels for the 3 hidden treasures is really satisfying, and those little symbols on the left, well, every stage has a set of unique achievements to go for. Get through stages without taking damage, doing the time limit segments super quickly, and you got more specific ones like not taking damage only in the vehicles, or not touching the water in the jungle levels. This is one of those whole, it's about the journey, not the destination kind of things. You know how it is. A common complaint with Shake It was simply getting to the end credits was far too short, around 5 to 6 hours. A time limit that's more acceptable for a portable game, but when you move to console, sure, some people wanted a little more. But for me, there is so much more gameplay time in trying to go for all the treasures, completing all the missions, and finding the hidden levels, which actually have unlockable maps that are accessible from the start of the game, but become easier to find after beating the final boss, who, just like I said with Wario's first boss encounter in Mario Land 2, the music is fantastic. Like, it may not have that strong of a Wario vibe like the eeriness of the other games, but the stuff here is still really good. The soundtrack is super underappreciated, dude. Mount Lava Lava, oh, that track is a jam. There used to be this very specific YouTube ad spot where if a shake happened in the gameplay, the entire UI would fall apart, and you would actually get to throw it around the screen. That was so damn cool, dude. This is one of the best advertisement spots I've ever seen. It's not Goodfield's best. Epic Yarn and Woolly World are definitely where that company did its best work yet, but the fact that Nintendo trusted this relatively unknown company with Wario Land, and regardless of its financial success, did a great job with it, is something I will always appreciate. Should have put Wario's big butt on the back of the box. That would have sold a few more copies, I think. Over the years, as Nintendo has pumped out Mario games with relatively uninspired stories, bosses, power-ups, etc., you name it, they got it. Or, you know, they don't got it, and you see people all over complaining about it. I agree with Mario, but Nintendo was actually doing all of that wacky original stuff this whole time, just with Wario instead. SpongeBob SquarePants Boating Bash. Oh man, the story for this one, let me tell you, it really breaks the mold. You're never gonna believe this. SpongeBob fails his driving test. Oh my god. This time is different though, introducing Seymour, letting SpongeBoy Me Bob know all about his drive course, destruction, recklessness, impairment, velocity, and escape. SpongeBob's about to go on a killing spree, isn't he? For the bulk of this game here, it kinda just feels like bumper boats. Drive around and crash into things. That's the whole package. You got the typical last man standing type mode, there's one where parts fly off of damaged vehicles that are up for grabs and the most points wins, and even some more traditional racing stages. And I'll be honest, it ain't bad. My big concern going into this would be the controls. On a home console, Boating Bash is a Wii exclusive, so I fully expected motion control shenanigans for the whole thing. But luckily, no. Just pop in an nunchuck and drive. I'll be damned, it actually controls decently. How did the driving game on Wii get controls right, but the platformer didn't? Though you can just use a Wii remote if you wanted to. The game is Wii Wheel compatible after all. It's just a hunk of plastic, it's compatible with everything. The story mode is pretty decent too, just a means to throw a bunch of different driving styles at you, and sprinkle in a few cutscenes along the way. There's a bunch of playable characters, vehicles out the wazoo, all with different attributes. I'm pretty surprised here. These developers took an idea that didn't seem like it would work on paper, and actually put a lot of love and care into it. It's not great, you know, SpongeBob wasn't gonna dethrone Mario Kart anytime soon, but for what it is, it's okay. Pretty bare bones, but not a bad time. And hell, you know what? I'm still in a bit of a Wii mode here. Let's check out another game for it. SpongeBob Squiggle Pants. Are you a normal person who doesn't know what a U-Draw is? You silly jellyfish. It was a peripheral that had a square on it that you can draw on top of using a built-in tablet to interact with the game going on the TV. You just pop the Wii remote in on the side and then boom. A Wii U gamepad prototype. How could you have gone through your life not hearing of Dude's Big Adventure before this? For what it's worth, it definitely works. You see, look, you gotta shake it to wake up Patchy the Pirate when the game starts. Money well spent. And hey, why not? Leave it to Way Forward of all companies to figure out how to get a SpongeBob game out of this. It's a WarioWare clone? The maniacs that made Shantae, Contra 4, and would eventually go on to make the Smurfs 2 game made a WarioWare version of SpongeBob. Wow. Well, jiggle me handle, SpongeBob, they actually did it. It's presented exactly like a WarioWare game. Every set of minigames has a new quirky art style. For the most part, the tablet works really well, and there are multiple different gestures that the game asks you to do, and they all pretty much work, only being an issue in a couple of the games. And there's even an art studio, so you can finally make the drawing of your dreams. And throw SpongeBob on top of it. I call it bold and brash. This game is actually pretty fun. I gotta admit here, I am totally stunned that I just said that. It's nowhere near as good as any actual WarioWare game out there, but let's be real. Can you name a clone of the WarioWare games? Probably not. It is hilarious that SpongeBob is the one to take that title. Interestingly enough, while the U-Draw tablet was not exclusive to the Wii, SpongeBob SquigglePants for the U-Draw was, so point to the Wii, I guess. But if for some reason you're not interested in scoring a U-Draw tablet of your own, surely there's one of you out there. Well, the game was also released on the 3DS, so there's your next best option. SpongeBob SquigglePants or WarioWare Gold? During the new play control phase of the Wii's life, Nintendo ported Power Tennis to the console. And it's not very good. This was not a game built with motion controls in mind. You swing the Wii remote to swing the racket, sure, but it more so feels like a swing is simply activating a button press instead, and it just doesn't really feel all that good. It's functional, don't get me wrong, and hey, the new widescreen is nice, but it's not a version I would recommend. There is a brand new tutorial sequence here though, explaining how the new controls work, so that's something. I mean, really, Mario Golf would have fared a whole lot better, but considering this whole new play control thing barely lasted even a year, it doesn't seem like Toadstool Tour would have ever stood a chance. But when Nintendo fails, leave it to Capcom, I guess. Instead of Mario Golf, Camelot would give us We Love Golf, published by Capcom. It's just what Mario Golf would have been on the Wii without the Mario characters and the addition of motion controls. And it's okay, the controls work decently, but it doesn't really feel like you're swinging the club one-to-one. You kind of just pull back the controller just enough so these symbols will cross each other, and then you swing when the next set of symbols cross over each other. And that's it. It doesn't feel one-to-one. It once again feels like you're just activating button presses. Similar to the Hot Shots golf game of before, I know many golf games tend to play similarly, but it's bizarre playing something that feels and looks like Mario without actually being Mario. And since Capcom is the one who published this one, not Nintendo, there's actually some unlockable costumes for a load of Capcom characters. Apollo Justice, Ryu, Jill Valentine. This is the best part of the game. For those who are in a need of a Mario Golf game on this console, you do have a few other options, but I think this one is the one that's gonna fit that bill the best. Mario Sports Mix. Right off the bat, well, not literally, there's no baseball bats in this one. Things are looking up. An opening cutscene, thank goodness. Now you have all of your favorite characters finding themselves in a white empty void to play a variety of sports. I guess it would be pretty difficult to properly convey all 4 of the included sports in anything but a white void, so in that essence, job well done. But yes, we have 4 sports in one game. The returning basketball, volleyball, hockey, and dodgeball. And why these 4 sports specifically? Well, because the selling point to Sports Mix is simply providing a fun arcadey experience rather than trying to infuse these sports with as much Mario juice as possible. And in the case of basketball, you can still rack up coins to get more points when scoring, but it's a lot less severe, and that change alone makes this a much better time. Just imagine all 4 of these games with the motion controls that you would expect. That's what we have here. And like before, it's okay. The traditional modes offer a safe, basic game with some of the courts offering just enough of a gimmick to spice things up, and when you want to go a little extra, each sport also has an associated minigame in the party mode. You get to dunk fruit in Petey's mouth, dodge bombs, volleying balls in a co-op rhythm game. This stuff is pretty cool. God, there's even a boss fight against a behemoth king. Like, what? Single player is terrible. There is like a story about this comet falling from the sky and having crystals that have sports balls in them. Dumb and amazing. But it all just results in a basic tournament mode which is painfully easy. And I mean just disgustingly mopping the floor with opponents in every single sport easy. And you have to go through said mode with all 4 sports in order to unlock everything. It doesn't matter if you already unlocked a court or character in hockey, you gotta go through it all over again in volleyball, and then the remaining 2 sports, you gotta go through 4 things to full completion in order to beat the game. That's terrible. What is it, Sonic Heroes? Luckily, there is an unlock everything code if you just want to get in there with some friends immediately with all of the options, so I would just recommend doing that and bypassing the story mode altogether. You can play as a slime in this one, damn it, and that should not be held back from the wanting public. Man, and while we're on the topic of the Wii, the amount of games that we didn't get for that console too is astounding. Some of you may remember Operation Rainfall, a fan-made movement to convince Nintendo to localize Xenoblade Chronicles, The Last Story, and Pandora's Tower. 3 RPGs that showed a lot of promise that could have filled an otherwise dead schedule from 2011 to 2013. And while that's all fine and good, we obviously got those games and they're all great. Like, all 3 games are really, really good, especially Xenoblade. Dude, how did everyone else forget about Earthseeker, Zangeki no Regenleave, Line Attack Heroes, Disaster Day of Crisis, which released in Europe but not in America? We may have gotten 3 heavy hitters, but we still missed out on some really good games that only recently all finally have fan translations and they all come highly recommended. Earthseeker, to be fair, isn't a Nintendo published game, so that goes against the rules of what I was saying before, but I wanted to mention it anyway, it's my video, shut up. Let's start off with Line Attack Heroes, probably the least known of the bunch. This is a WiiWare game all about hacking and slashing enemies so they will then join your line of attackers, and then you can wipe out your opponent with ease. It's pretty straightforward. The goals may change, but how you get to the end basically remains the same. It's quirky, it's satisfying to control. For a game that had to stick to the WiiWare insane 40 megabyte file size limit, this gets a thumbs up from me. Quite frankly, any game that released on that service is a miracle. Plus, this is also the debut game for Grezzo, the studio that would later on remaster the 64 Zelda games for 3DS, remaking Link's Awakening and Miitopia for Switch, so yes, this game is very, very notable. But now on to actual games. First off, we have Zangeki no Regenleave, or now fan-dubbed Blades of Regenleave. This is an action game all about taking down hordes of enemies in an effort to stop the apocalypse, Ragnarok. You can get a bunch of new weapons and gear and whatnot, but that's more or less the entire game. It's pretty jank, I'm not gonna lie, but it utilizes Wii Motion Plus, so it's right up there with Fling Smash. I can only complain so much. If this game were to have been localized, it likely wouldn't have won any awards, but a game of this style was something the Wii was desperately lacking. It would have totally been welcome. It even featured online co-op at the time. That's shockingly ambitious for that console. Being able to run around these large landscapes and take down huge monsters with some decent motion controls and some friends along the way, it's experiences like this that made me the Wii fan that I am. But no other game featured on this video encapsulates pure Japanese absurdity with the perfect amount of Nintendo magic like Captain Rainbow, brought to us by Skip Limited. You know about Chibi Robo, right? Yeah, those guys. We already discussed the bit generations and art style games in the past, but Chibi Robo is easily the thing that this company is the most known for. This cute and wacky adventure where you play as a little robot who just wants to clean up and make friends. It's just delightful all around. Okay, you are Nick, an ordinary guy who used to play a popular TV superhero, Captain Rainbow, and eventually you wake up washed up on Mimin Island, a land where wishes are set to come true, and you are now on a quest to regain your popularity. And it just so happens this land is filled with other washed up Nintendo characters. This is brilliant. You got some more well-known ones like Birdo and Little Mac, but he's fat now, that's hilarious. But also the army from Famicom Wars, Takamaru from the mysterious Murasame Castle, the Devil from Devil World, and even Osan from NES Golf. Everyone said it used to be Mario, but nope, we found out here, it's Osan, and in this game he plays with his balls. Simply running around and trying to discover all of the island's secrets and helping out all these characters get their wishes granted, there is never a dull moment on this adventure. It is so good. Guys, okay, like, when Hikari here gets you to finally transform into the perfect body shape to fit this oddly specific hole in the back of her residence, wow, perfect, that Captain Rainbow just happens to fit in. You find a Famicom disk system in the back, I'm gonna lose it. There is no fan translation that I am more grateful to have access to than this one. It's excellent. When I first ran into Birdo in a jail cell, yeah, my curiosity certainly piqued. I've heard many a story about this interaction over the years, but I was still not prepared for what I got to experience here. So, it turns out, This robot here, Mappo, who's from Gift Pia by the way, and Min Min Island's police officer, jailed Birdo because they were seen coming out of the women's restroom despite Mappo swearing they were a man, which leads to Birdo begging you to go to her house to find proof of her being a woman, to which you find a mysterious item that was vibrating under her pillow on her bed. But hey, it's okay, I eventually sent Birdo off into space, never to be seen again. She wanted this, I promise you. This game, this is one of the games of all time. Once you know how one of these games play, you kinda know how the rest of them work too. You got a couple of new powers in this one, like there's the propeller suit, the ice flower, and the penguin suit, which is just like the ice flower mixed with the frog suit. It's not really that good. Yoshi finally returns, always a nice touch, although you can't bring him with you outside of the levels that you find him in, which is very weird, but okay. And then instead of the original bosses of before, the Koopalings return. And sure, now we are more than sick of seeing them, but this was the first time they made an appearance in years, so at the time, it was really cool actually. In terms of the core game though, it is practically exactly the same as the last one. It just looks and sounds nicer since it is now on the Wii rather than the DS. The big selling point for the jump onto console was the addition of co-op. And I'll keep this as simple as I can. 2 players is fine, 4 players is an outright disaster. Just don't do it. And the series staple unoriginality plagues this feature as well. Although oddly enough, it turns out that these 2 actually do have proper names. According to the dev team, these 2 have been given the nicknames Buckenberry and A La Gold, and I demand that they now be called this until the end of time. At the end of the day, I do still enjoy Nisimb Wii. It's honestly probably my favorite of the entire series. It doesn't try anything that new, despite the name of the game, but what it does do, it does well enough. Super similar to the DS game, but it kinda gets a free pass for being on a console this time around. But now it's time to talk about the big boys, the main reason I wanted to do this video in the first place. Newer Super Mario Bros. Wii. This is a full-on modification of the entire original game. The whole thing. Level themes, new. Music, new. Boss fights, new. Level designs, fantastic. The Hammer Bros suit even shows up. That wasn't in the original game. I don't know how they did this part, but the overworld map is entirely new as well. And it's all interconnected, and it does it way better than how the official Wii U game did it. Man, this is hardly even recognizable to the game that this is a mod of. The adventure is long too. Going for 100% is gonna take you roughly 6 to 7 hours. This is honestly a massive achievement for those at the newer team. And if you wanted even more newer goodness on top of that, there are some extra mini adventures as well. Summer Sun is a short romp that goes through a bunch of levels that have a more sunny aesthetic, while Holiday Special is similar but has a snowy aesthetic. While I wouldn't go as far as to say that the newer games are some of my favorite 2D platformers or anything like that, I would say that I enjoyed these more than the official games that we got, and at the very least, they do have a stronger form of identity. So today on our continued escapades throughout the world of Bikini Bottom, we have a double header here, SpongeBob Truth or Square and Creature from the Krusty Krab, 2 highly requested games in the series. Initially, these 2 may not seem all that special, but relative to the previous 2 successes, things do get a bit more interesting. 2009's Truth or Square saw the return of Heavy Iron Studios, the same company responsible for Battle for Bikini Bottom, the movie game, and after those, a handful of titles based on Pixar films, as well as UFC Personal Trainer right after Truth or Square. As for 2006's Creature from the Krusty Krab, made not by Heavy Iron Studios, the only real claim to fame for this one was that it was a launch title for the Wii, since Nintendo apparently showed a lot of interest in using SpongeBob to push their new console. It even got a spotlight at Nintendo's E3 2006 press conference. What a badge of honor, I guess. Oh no, wait. Breacher from the Krusty Carb. Whoops. Oh, and yeah, I'll be playing both games on the Wii today, but believe me, I've heard all the warnings you guys have been giving me about doing so. Truth or Square does have an HD version, but I don't own an Xbox 360. Otherwise though, it's the same game, so that's nice. And besides, on the Wii, we can still use a normal controller. Creature from the Krusty Krab, on the other hand, has mandatory motion controls, and hey, if my man Reggie can get behind it, then so can I. We'll cross this bridge when we get to it. There are also some portable versions of these games out there, but that might be for another time. Although Truth or Square is also on the PSP, and it's like the same exact game there, so that's pretty cool, but the other games, that's a whole other bag of Alaskan bullworms. It did release later, but considering this is technically the end of the Heavy Iron SpongeBob trilogy, let's start off with Truth or Square, and put a bookend on the story that Battle for Bikini Bottom started. It's the anniversary of the Krusty Krab, and it is time to party. Amidst all of the preparations, Mr. Krabs entrusts the Krabby Patty secret formula to SpongeBob. Bad idea? He's gonna immediately forget where he put it, isn't he? Here's where Plankton comes in to save the day, offering to conduct experiments on our spongy hero to poke through his brain so he can remember where he put that slip of paper. Thanks to all of these micro robots being inserted into his mind and all of his friends getting really awfully nostalgic, SpongeBob travels through a bunch of happy memories in hopes of remembering where he put the formula. And considering we literally just saw him put it in his back pocket in the opening cutscene, I got a sneaking suspicion I can see the ending coming from a mile away. The premise is kinda similar to the animated special of the same name, but the whole going through memories thing in the game is an excuse to reference a bunch of episodes from the early years of the cartoon, which isn't what happens in the animated special. It is a love letter to the old school fans of SpongeBob. It does take a few creative liberties with how the actual events took place, but hey, the sentiment is still nice. And anyway, the simple concept of a video game clip show is pretty cool, especially with as many iconic moments from the cartoon as this one, which ends up being a big shame because the game itself, First off, like, the entire soundtrack is reused from Battle for Bikini Bottom. Level 1, Jellyfish Fields, uses the same music as Level 1, Jellyfish Fields. I couldn't pick out a single music track that was original. Battle for Bikini Bottom's soundtrack was fine and all, it certainly helps that the game was also really good, but considering the whole idea behind Truth or Square is calling back to older SpongeBob episodes, on top of having older music, it doesn't really give this game a strong identity. And that would be fine if the rest of the game was strong enough to compensate for it, but sadly, that's also not the case. Stages are super linear, there's no room to explore here. You're pointed in the right direction at all times, there are some enemies or slight puzzles along the way, some big battles to finish the stages off. On paper, it's not too dissimilar from the movie game, but there was next to no variety here to keep things interesting. The movie game was also linear, but stages were a lot larger. There were these sliding and driving levels to break up the platforming, and there were plenty of side challenges to tackle as well. Here in Truth or Square, most of the stages play off exactly the same, and it makes things pretty boring and monotonous. You walk in a straight line, you mash the attack button a bunch to deal with the enemies, you get told where to go endlessly even though the levels are still mostly straight lines. It's just nothing interesting happens, and it's very disappointing. Until SpongeBob gets fat. I guess the main gameplay element that's trying to keep things exciting are the power-ups. You'll often run into an item that powers you up for either a time limit or until you take damage. They not only allow you to deal with the overload of enemies that get thrown at you a whole lot easier, but they're also the only way you gain control of characters that the previous games gave a lot more time and attention to, so it simply feels like a downgrade. There's no dedicated Patrick or Sandy gameplay to allow for different styles of challenges. You just play as SpongeBob, except for the times you play as someone else for like 5 seconds just to go on a rampage. At least we can play as Squidward though, so that's more than we can say for the last 2 games. That's a bullet point on the back of the box, I guess. Oh wait, it turns out there actually are extras to go for. However, to access them, you have to go back to a stage after it's already completed. Why are we introducing backtracking to linear levels? Just to pad the game out some more? I mean, I guess so, because the game otherwise is less than 3 hours long. Less than 180 minutes from the title screen. There's the credits. At the end, you take down a huge plankton robot. SpongeBob remembers he kept the formula in his back pocket the whole time. Called it. And the last 3 hours of my life feel relatively wasted. But at least we can get a few costumes, so hey, I got nothing. SpongeBob SquarePants Truth or Square isn't bad, but it's boring and uninspired. Heavy Iron Studios may have been involved, but it is not the same team we wanted it to be. On the bright side though, the in-game cutscenes are pretty nice. You know, the lip syncing and the animation, totally on point here. A lot better than the stock animations of the previous games. And even rehydrated when I think about it. The models are nicer for sure, but Truth or Square is definitely a whole lot more animated. Maybe Breacher from the Krusty Carb is gonna be better. Sure, there are motion controls in a Wii launch title, it's worth being terrified over them, but maybe with a new developer at the helm, Blitz Games, we can expect a fresher take on the franchise. The Wii banner is shockingly bare bones, and man, hyping myself up is gonna blow up right in my face, isn't it? The story begins with our heroes in the middle of sleeping. SpongeBob's bed turns into a car, he revs off into the distance, and it looks like we're gonna race. Thankfully, we only see him from the back during the race. That's nice. You stare at this for too long and you'll turn to stone. Oh, I hate it. I hate it so much. I like to imagine all of these young SpongeBob fans getting a fancy new Nintendo Wii and a new Sponge game for Christmas, greeted to this. Man, I really feel sorry for them. Honestly, the game's premise is pretty weird. There's like no overarching story for the most part. At least nothing is told to you outright. SpongeBob, Patrick, and Plankton are all in the middle of dreaming. Each one tells their own little mini story, and then you kind of just piece everything together from that knowledge. SpongeBob, after a few races, drives into an abyss, which turns out to be the Alaskan Bullworm, which is where we find Old Man Jenkins and his airplane that we used to escape from it. Meanwhile, Patrick is the superhero Starfish Man in pursuit of the evil, dreaded Patrick, which eventually leads him into an evil space layer to destroy an evil UFO, and once the evil deed is done, he returns to Earth. And then we have Plankton. Well, he's evil, of course, and wants to take over the world. That's about what I expected. This time, though, after escaping from a huge Krabby Patty, he turns very large. Yeah, why not? It's his dream, makes sense. But yeah, that's kind of everything that happens. There's no real major plot point that ties everything together aside from things are just happening. But the real interesting thing is all of these dreams end up coming together at the very end somehow for a big final encounter in which the box art has been inadvertently spoiling this entire time. Whoops. That's kind of fascinating, I guess. It makes absolutely no sense, but sure. Except when you take down Plankton, that's not the end. There's one more race segment where you can either play as SpongeBob, or if you collect enough trinkets throughout the adventure, Patrick or Plankton. And then after that one race, which is not difficult in the slightest and has no bearing on the story whatsoever, then the credits roll. What? Oh, and it turns out that Gary was actually dreaming all of the other dreams the whole time. And then SpongeBob dies. At least in Truth or Square, there was a plot that tied everything together. The stages may have been telling individual stories, but there was still an overarching narrative that made sense. Maybe to Creature from the Krusty Krab's credit, it's kinda nice that every single stage does do something different, but rather than feeling like there's a whole lot of well thought out variety here, it more so comes off as the game has absolutely no idea what it wants to do. You got platforming, combat, racing, side-scrolling, on-rails airplane segments, causing mayhem with giant plankton, random minigames that kinda pop out of nowhere all the time. Creature from the Krusty Krab does do a lot of things, but it doesn't do any of those things necessarily well. I guess I could argue it's kind of a better approach to just playing as SpongeBob in Truth or Square, but neither of these approaches really leave that much of an impression. Like, the very first thing you do is a race, but there's no opponents, so you just keep driving until the course ends. Oh, but even when opponents do start popping up, it's still just a matter of getting to the end. You're not actually racing anybody, as if the main challenge is to simply stay awake. Oh, and yeah, that's right, we got motion controls on top of all that to deal with. Again, we got the Wii version here. For all of the driving stuff, it's fine, you know, you tilt the Wii remote to lean in the direction you want, that makes sense, but once we get to the platforming and the combat, the special attacks are performed by shaking the nunchuck. Oh god, why? Oh, and in case you were wondering, yeah, it barely works half the time, so that's cool. Alright, we gotta turn this winch to open the door, hold the Wii remote vertically, and move it around in the air. Got it. GameCube edition. Let me just see something real quick and, okay, good. It's normal. I'm still gonna stick to a full playthrough of the Wii version just for morbid curiosity, but it's at least good to know that there is a normal version of the game under all of this garbage. Perhaps the game is simply too linear for my liking. I know plenty of people out there are super nostalgic for this one, but this is my very first time. And I don't know, man. It's not great. Nothing in the adventure is particularly challenging. The level of hand-holding going on, constantly pulling you towards the next path, is kind of ridiculous. And some of the stages go on for way too long. Things just drag on for no real reason. Some of the concepts here are admittedly pretty cool, but the gameplay is not strong enough to match that potential. Sure, Truth or Square wasn't all that exciting either, but you at least had some more tools in your arsenal to make the moment-to-moment gameplay just a touch more interesting. In Creature from the Krusty Krab, while the platforming is decent, the combat's okay, more so in the not Wii versions, and everything else, it's a total crapshoot. You know, I take back what I said earlier. Saying this is a platformer really wouldn't be accurate. It is a story-based minigame collection, with a couple obnoxiously long platforming stages sprinkled about. And with that understanding, I guess some of the gameplay becomes more inoffensive for the younger players out there, but we are clearly going further and further away from what made SpongeBob games so interesting in the first place. I do like this dude though. This guy's alright by me. What the? There's a music mode? You pick an instrument, each one has unique controls to play the notes. Oh my god, SpongeBob did Wii Music before Wii Music. That's incredible. I guess, if anything, check out Truth or Square. I enjoyed this one a little bit more. The box art is absolutely terrifying, and it's also on Xbox 360, so if you want some easy achievements, that'll be the way to go. But even on the PSP, the entire game is on that console as well. So if you want to take SpongeBob and put him in your pants, you can do that?